Chapter 1497. More and more students and elders gathered at Qingming Square. Many of them had not realized what was going on and were still in a daze. However, many of them were so shocked that their jaws almost dropped when they saw Rongxiu and Chu Luyue. They knew Rongxiu, but who was the girl next to him? She looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. Her clothes were simple, but it did not hide her beauty. Her appearance could topple a city, and her grace was outstanding as well. Just by standing there, she seemed to have gathered all the light. Everything around him seemed to have become much dimmer. Except for Rongxiu. Seeing the two tightly clasped hands and their intimate posture, almost everyone felt as if they had been hit in the head with a stick and were dumbfounded. This was, since when did Rongxiu get so close to a girl? Moreover, why did this woman look so familiar? Chu Luyue and the others had just returned, and the elders had been wondering about her identity, so they did not pay attention to the school. The incident in Fang State City had not spread, so no one knew about it. Lu Yu. Mu Hongyu had just left the Donghuang Bell Tower when she was summoned by the elders. She immediately saw Rongxiu and Chu Luyue standing in the middle. She had no choice. She stood out from the crowd and was too eye-catching. Chu Luyue was pulled back from her thoughts by the crisp sound. She looked up and saw Mu Hongyu. She waved at her. The surrounding people subconsciously made way for her. Mu Hongyu walked over quickly without any hindrance. She had not seen Chu Luyue's familiar face for a long time. Moreover, she had not had the chance to talk to her in Fang State City, so she could not help but feel a little emotional when she saw her now. She wanted to jump into Chu Luyue's arms, but before she could do so, she felt a cold gaze sweep past her. Mu Hongyu coughed and stood in front of Chu Luyue politely. She did not dare to touch her. Lu Yu, why didn't you rest well before coming here? She hadn't even had the time to change her clothes yet. Chu Luyue smiled. Something happened here, so I came here. Mu Hongyu thought she was talking about the loud sound just now, so she nodded and looked at Wan Jiushan. Us too. The elders asked us to come here quickly. I don't know what happened. She had not been in the school for long, so she was naturally not sure about the situation. Chu Luyue. Let's wait here. The elders should be able to handle it. Mu Hongyu did not suspect and nodded. On the other side, Luo Shishir, Luo Yanlin, and the others also walked over. When he saw Chu Luyue, Luo Yanlin's face darkened. Unlike the others, he had already heard about what happened outside from Luo Yanming and the others. Naturally, he knew that the so-called Chu Yu's true identity was Shenghuanyu, the rumored princess of the Yuntian Tower. In other words, she was Rongxiu's woman. After hearing all that, Luo Yanlin felt terrible. When he saw her in person, his feelings were even more complicated. His sister actually fell in love with a woman. Originally, he had already thought that if she really insisted, he would ask Chu Yu for her opinion. Fortunately, he did not do that. Otherwise, he would have lost all his face. Luo Yanlin was angry. However, when he thought about it carefully, it was his sister's unrequited love from the beginning to the end. Chu Yu had always been restrained and polite. There was nothing wrong with it. At the end of the day, he could not blame her. Luo Yanlin could only silently swallow his blood. His sister was going to snatch someone from Rongxiu. Just thinking about it was exciting enough. He took a deep breath and glanced at Luo Shishir. Fortunately, Luo Shishir had basically regained her composure. This was the only thing that comforted him. On the other hand, Zhuosheng was being pulled by many people to ask what had happened in Fang State City and who the beautiful woman who had suddenly appeared was. Zhuosheng was stunned by the questions and scratched his head casually. Her? She's Chu Yu. Everyone was in an uproar. Chu Luyue could clearly feel that the gazes on her had become even more anxious. Fortunately, her psychological endurance had always been quite good, so she did not take these things to heart. Her eyes were fixed on Thousand Wine Mountain. If Rongxiu had not held her back, she would have already rushed over. The surrounding people obviously did not realize the seriousness of the matter at Thousand Wine Mountain. Zhuosheng was annoyed after being asked so many questions, so he decided to tell them everything. Of course, he chose the exciting content to say. Everyone exclaimed in surprise as they listened, their hearts filled with shock. Almost everyone's attention was focused on Chu Luyue and Rongxiu. I really didn't expect Chu Yu to be from Shangguanyu. So she's the princess that senior brother Rongxiu personally chose. No wonder senior brother Rongxiu treats her so well. Didn't they say that she's an outsider? But her talent is too amazing. And that weapon refining venerable is actually her Taizu. With such a background, who dares to say that she's not worthy? Am I the only one who noticed that she broke through from the early stage of the 8th stage to the middle stage of the 9th stage in just a few months? Oh, I'm already numb. There was no other way. This person could casually pick out any one of them and it would make others envious and jealous. After a few times, one would get used to it. Chu Luyue did not care about this at this moment. Dumpling, did you leave any evidence in the spring of Thousand Wine Mountain? She asked in her heart. Dumpling was stunned for a moment and looked hesitant. This. I don't think so, Chu Luyue's eyelids twitched. However, at this moment, a fluctuation suddenly spread out from the barrier outside the academy. At the same time, a deep and vast dragon's roar resounded throughout the world. Shangguan Jing. Get out here. Digression, 6 p.m. mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1498. This furious roar carried the might of thunder as it reverberated between heaven and earth, clearly landing in the ears of everyone in the academy. Everyone's expression changed, and they immediately looked at Chu Luyue in unison. Shangguan Jing, wasn't that the Taizu of Shangguanyu? Was he the rumored extremely powerful weapon refining supremacy? Just who was it that was so daring to clamor outside the Ling Shao Academy? Chu Luyue's heart suddenly sank. That dragon's roar, everyone, calm down. A low shout that was full of vigor was heard. It was filled with pressure. This caused the originally restless Qingming Square to quickly quiet down. Chu Luyue looked in the direction of the voice. It was Elder Danqing who spoke. They had not seen each other for a while. Elder Danqing looked much more haggard, and the hair at his temples was much whiter, as if it was covered in a layer of frost. He was about to fly towards the gate of the academy when he suddenly stopped and looked at Chu Luyue. Chu, Shangguanyu, go and invite Senior Shangguan to see what's going on. Chu Luyue nodded. Yes. Elder Danqing looked at her with a complicated expression. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he left without saying a word. Chu Luyue turned back and glanced at him. Although Elder Danqing and Jiang Jiwan severed their master-disciple relationship, he still sincerely taught her for several years. Now that she's gone, it's inevitable that he's sad. Rongxiu said lightly. Don't mind it. Although Elder Danqing was biased in the past, he wouldn't go so far as to blame us for what happened. To say that it was resentment, it really couldn't be considered hatred. At most, she felt a little complicated. After all, a person's death was like a lamp going out. Chu Luyue retracted her gaze. I know. If Elder Danqing really could not get over it, he would definitely come to her directly. Actually, what I'm worried about now is, Chu Luyue pursed her lips. If he guessed correctly, the person who came today was very likely to be, I'll accompany you back to Jiuheng Mountain. Rongxiu squeezed her hand. Chu Luyue nodded and immediately set off with Rongxiu. On the way there, the two of them bumped into Taizu, who happened to be coming out. Taizu. Chu Luyue immediately went up to him. Are you all right? Taizu held her and looked her up and down. After confirming that she was fine, he heaved a sigh of relief. The uneasiness in Chu Liuyue's heart grew stronger, and he grabbed Taizu's sleeve tightly. Taizu, there seems to be, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon Clan. Taizu's expression was grave as he enunciated each word. Their movements are quite fast. Chu Liuyue's heart seemed to be gripped by something. Taizu and the Great Void Phoenix Dragon Clan had a huge grudge. This time, not long after Taizu woke up, they directly chased him to Lingxiao College. It was obvious that they were serious. If he didn't handle it well, he was afraid. Don't worry. This is Taizu's own business. It won't implicate you and Lingxiao College. Taizu patted Chu Liuyue's head gently and said in a gentle voice. Chu Liyue frowned. Is a descendant of the Shengguan clan. Naturally, we should advance and retreat together with Taizu. Taizu was stunned when he heard that. Endless emotion seemed to surge in his eyes. In the end, thousands of words turned into one sentence. Good The Shengguan clan had never been afraid of any danger. Don't worry. When I chose to wake up this time, I knew that I would have to face all of this. The great ancestor laughed out loud. Just wait in the college. Taizu will solve these problems. But, Chu Liyue wanted to go out with him, but on second thought, she might only be a burden if she went, so she swallowed the rest of her words. Then you must be careful. Taizu nodded and looked at Rong Xiao meaningfully. Rong Xiao nodded calmly. Taizu was relieved. His figure flashed and disappeared on the spot. Chu Liyue raised her gaze slightly and looked in the direction of the college's gate. She knew that at this moment, the great phoenix dragon was waiting for them outside. She didn't know if Taizu could successfully solve these problems this time. Chu Liyue slowly clenched her fists. The reason why she was so worried was that Taizu and the Great Void Phoenix Dragon Clan had been accumulating hatred for a long time. On the other hand, back then, when she helped Zichen reconstruct his body, she used the two wing bones of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon's corpse. Although the remaining corpse had been sealed in the Heavenly Square Cauldron. But now that the Great Void Phoenix Dragon Clan was outside the college's barrier, she felt that this would be a big hidden danger. It was like a time bomb that would explode at any time. Boom! Another loud sound was heard. It was from the Thousand Wine Mountain. Chu Liyue frowned and looked back. Dark clouds gathered in the sky above the Thousand Wine Mountain, forming a huge vortex. The sky was dark, and a storm swept through, as if it was going to swallow the Thousand Wine Mountain. Thunder rumbled from the clouds, and silver snake-like lightning swam everywhere. From time to time, it lit up half the sky, but it made everything seem even more treacherous and terrifying. A storm was coming. From here, one could vaguely see the figures of Elder Bo Yen and the others rushing towards the Thousand Wine Mountain. In the gloomy world, their figures actually seemed so small and insignificant. Chu Liyue slowly clenched her fists. Thousand Wine Mountain. When Elder Bo Yen and the others arrived, they found that the barrier outside the mountain had already shattered. This was also one of the reasons why this commotion was clearly seen by everyone. But this was not the thing that worried the elders the most. Because, the spring at the top of the mountain had stopped flowing. It was still daytime. The spring seems to be freezing. Elder Wanzheng shouted in a deep voice, and there was a rare trace of panic in his eyes. How could this be? Elder Huafeng sucked in a breath of cold air. There's so much Tianlei inside. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be at this time. Elder Bo Yen made a prompt decision. Immediately lead Tianlei into the spring. At this time, there was no time to think about why this would happen. The most important thing now was to solve the problem. Elder Wanzheng and Elder Huafeng nodded solemnly. Elder Bo Yen took the lead, and with a flash, he went straight for the spring. Boom! Suddenly, a bolt of heavenly lightning struck down. It fell in front of Elder Bo Yen. Sparks flew everywhere. The violent and terrifying energy seemed to want to tear everything apart. Elder Bo Yen was shocked and immediately set up a barrier in front of him. At the same time, he retreated. However, his chest was still hit by the aftershock. Bo Yen. How are you? Are you okay? The two elders immediately went forward and supported him. Elder Bo Yen shook his head, but his expression was very ugly. I'm fine. But this spring, at this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. They looked up and saw that it was Elder Ouyang. His expression was anxious as he quickly ran over. When he saw the frost at the edge of the spring, he could not help but be shocked and immediately cursed. Who the F***ck stole the Tianlei power from here? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1499. These words caused Elder Bo Yen and the others to be stunned on the spot. Ouyang, what did you say? Tianlei's power had been stolen? How was this possible? Elder Ouyang's figure flashed and flew to the side of the few of them. His expression was anxious and angry as he pointed at the spring. The Tianlei's power that had accumulated for several years inside. If it wasn't stolen, how could it suddenly erupt? He had been wandering around here every day, but he hadn't noticed it at all. Now that it had happened so suddenly, it would be difficult to deal with it. Then what should we do? Elder Xiaofan was at a loss. This 1,000-wine mountain had a special status. Under normal circumstances, it was mainly guarded by Elder Ouyang and the other weapon refiners in the academy. The other elders would at most play a supporting role. Although they knew that the 1,000-wine mountain was important and that the spring was very precious and could not be touched casually, most of them did not know the specific situation. Now that it had happened so suddenly, they could only be anxious, but they did not know what to do. Elder Ouyang rubbed his face in annoyance. What should we do? What should we do? The freezing of the spring proves that a lot of the Tianlei's power has been stolen. Even if all the weapon refiners in the academy were to refine weapons together and trigger the Tianlei, I'm afraid it would be too late. One had to know that in order to control this spring, they had been working diligently for several years and had spent a lot of effort. Now that something had happened, how could they save it in time? The few of them realized the seriousness of the matter and fell silent with solemn expressions. At this moment, another figure was rapidly approaching them. They raised their heads and saw that it was Shang Yusen. He frowned and looked at them. The spring has started to freeze. Why are you all still here? Shang Yusen, why are you still in the academy? Elder Xiaofan asked in surprise. According to the previous pattern, he would not stay in the academy for more than a month. But this time, he had been back for a long time, and he had not left yet. Shang Yusen resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Xiaofan, what time is it now? You still have the mood to care about this? Actually, he just wanted to stay in the academy for a while longer and look for Chuyu to study the Scarlet Heaven Sword more. He didn't expect that a bunch of messy things had happened recently, so it had been delayed. Today, it was even worse, the boy had turned into a girl. Where is that senior Shangguan? Shang Yusen went straight to the point. He's a weapon refining venerable. If he's willing to help, there might be some hope. Elder Ouyang slapped his head. How could I have forgotten about that? Although the matter was quite troublesome, they still had a ready-made big helper. However, when Elder Bo Yen and the others heard this, their expressions changed slightly. When they arrived, they also heard the dragon roar, as well as the low roar filled with threat and warning. It seems like some dragons have come to cause trouble for him. He shouldn't be in the academy now. Elder Bo Yen said solemnly. Shang Yusen and Elder Ouyang looked at each other. Obviously, they were still a little confused. Dragon race? What's going on? Dan Qing went to deal with it. We don't know what happened exactly. But that person suppressed 9 dragons in the graveyard of the northern region of the primordial desolate land. If I'm not wrong, he should have a lot of enmity with the dragon clan. Elder Bo Yen guessed with some uncertainty. If it wasn't for the situation at Thousand Wine Mountain, they would have followed him over. What's going on? Elder Ouyang crossed his hands. To be able to make the dragon clan chase after them with such fanfare, it definitely isn't a small matter. By the way, do you know which branch of the dragon clan it is? The few of them shook their heads. They didn't even go to take a look, so how would they know? The other party's pressure is extremely strong. I'm afraid it won't be easy to deal with. If that's the case, then I'm afraid he won't be back for a while. Shang Yusen looked at the spring eye. The layer of frost had started to appear from the edge, and a quarter of it had already frozen. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before the spring eye was completely frozen. At that time, I'm afraid, during this period of time, we have been carefully watching over it. There are no abnormalities with the spring eye. How did so much of the heavenly lightning's power get stolen out of nowhere? Elder Ouyang really couldn't understand. Under normal circumstances, when something like this happened, they would definitely be aware of it. Elder Bo Yen suddenly thought of something and his expression changed. Hua Feng, when did Chu Yu, that red-tailed phoenix in Shangguanyu, break through to become a crimson gold heavenly phoenix? Elder Hua Feng pondered for a moment, then his eyes widened slightly. Could it be that you suspect, for the red-tailed phoenix to break through the shackles and become an ancient divine beast, it needs a lot of power? The Tianlei power accumulated in the spring eye is obviously the most suitable. But, this doesn't mean that this matter has something to do with her, right? If it was really her red-tailed phoenix who did it, why didn't we notice it at all? The few of them fell silent. This was also what they were most puzzled about. Over the years, they had put in a lot of effort on Thousand Wine Mountain. They were basically clear about any fluctuations that occurred in the spring eye. However, they didn't know that the Tianlei power had been stolen. No matter what, call her over and ask her first. Elder Bo Yen instructed. Elder Hua Feng could only agree. Okay. Chu Luyue and Rong Xiao had just returned to the Qingming Plaza when they saw Elder Hua Feng return. When he saw Elder Hua Feng heading straight for him, Chu Luyue knew something was wrong. Elder Hua Feng waved at her. Bo Yen wants you to go. Chu Luyue didn't ask any more questions. He took a deep breath and followed her. Seeing that Rong Xiao seemed to be planning to go with them, Elder Hua Feng originally wanted to stop them, but after thinking about it, he decided against it and quickly brought the two of them to the Thousand Wine Mountain. Only the people on the Qingming Square were left bewildered. In front of the Thousand Wine Mountain, Chu Luyue glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw that there was a layer of frost on the mouth of the spring. From the serious looks on the elders' faces, she knew that they were in big trouble this time. Elder Bo Yan's gaze was sharp. He pointed at the spring and went straight to the point. Girl, does this matter have anything to do with you? At the same time, outside the academy's barrier, the two forces were in a stalemate. Inside the barrier was Shengguan Jing and a few elders of the academy. Outside the barrier was a tall man who looked to be in his 50s. Behind him stood a few young juniors. The man standing at the front was wearing a gray robe. His hair was white and his eyes were purplish gold. On his neck and hands, there were faint purplish gold scales the size of fingernails. Under the sunlight, they reflected a sparkling glow. He stared at Shengguan Jing coldly and sneered. Shengguan Jing, you're lucky. Hand over the corpses of my clansmen and I'll let you die in one piece. Digression, an excavator in his lower abdomen had shoveled away half a mountain. It had been in pain since dawn until now. He struggled to get up. 9 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1500. Hearing this, the expressions of the elders standing inside the barrier changed slightly. Who exactly was this person? He was so domineering. Shengguan Jing was a top-notch weapon refining supremacy in the Divine Ruins world. How could they be so rude? Elder Danqing had just arrived when he encountered this situation. He could not help but frown. Senior Shengguan. He flew to Shengguan Jing's side and quickly sized up the people outside the barrier. He was secretly shocked. From the looks of it, he was indeed from the Dragon Clan. However, why was the color of their scales a little off? He cupped his hands. I am Elder Danqing of Lingxiao College. May I know why you are here today? However, the old man opposite him only glanced at him before quickly retracting his gaze. His gaze was cold and indifferent, as if he was looking at an ant. It was obvious that he did not take Elder Danqing seriously at all. Elder Danqing's heart surged with anger. Although his status in the academy was not as high as Elder Bo Yan's, it was definitely not low. Even the people from the first-rate aristocratic families would be polite when they saw him. He had never seen such an arrogant person. He knew that the dragon race had always been arrogant, but this was too much. Everyone, you came rashly without informing us in advance. Moreover, you are so arrogant in front of Lingxiao College. Aren't you going a little overboard? Elder Danqing's face darkened. The old man finally glanced at Elder Danqing again. A trace of impatience appeared on his indifferent face. Who do you think you are? Are you worthy of questioning me here? You, Elder Danqing was about to retort when Shengguan Jing stopped him. He smiled and said, "This is between us. Why implicate others?" When Elder Danqing heard this, he had a bad feeling. What kind of status did Shengguan Jing have? Previously, in Fangzhou City, there were so many people present, but he did not show a good expression. However, now that the person who came was so domineering, there was no anger on his face. In fact, his tone was rather polite. The other party's identity was probably even more shocking than he had expected. Shengguan Jing, stop talking nonsense. This time, even if you were hiding in Lingxiao College, it would be easy for me to take your life. If you have the guts, come out immediately and hide inside. Even if you don't feel cowardly, I feel ashamed for you. The person who came had a very bad temper and spoke very straightforwardly. His words were filled with anger. Shengguan Jing didn't seem to be angry. Instead, he laughed. Mao Yao, after so many years, your tone is still as arrogant as ever. Leave his corpse intact? He had to have the ability to kill Shengguan Jing first. Upon hearing this name, Elder Danqing was momentarily stunned. Mao Yao. Why does this name sound so familiar? Suddenly, his heart shook. Her eyes suddenly widened as she looked at the man outside the barrier. Mao Yao. Wasn't that the one who was rather famous in the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race? It was rumored that 1,000 years ago, there was a family that had obtained a great phoenix dragon egg by chance. They secretly brought the dragon egg back and wanted to force a contract with it. Unfortunately, before he could take action, he was caught by the great phoenix dragon. That time, the great phoenix dragon had only sent 3 people. Mao Yao was one of them. Although it was only a second-rate family, its strength was at its peak at that time. There were even 2 god venerables holding down the fort. It was even stronger than some of the declining first-rate families and clans. If they could contract with that great phoenix dragon egg, they might be able to reach a higher level. Unfortunately, they had lost this opportunity forever. Mao Yao and the other 2 only used a day and a night to slaughter their entire clan. After the news spread, the entire Divine Ruins world was shocked. As one of the 2 great ancient divine beasts, the great phoenix dragon had always been filled with mystery in everyone's impression. Many people might not have the chance to see the great phoenix dragon in their entire lives. As a result, The names of Mao Yao and the other two became the representatives of the great phoenix dragon race from then on. Elder Danqing had never thought that he would actually be able to see this legendary figure. He had never thought that it would be under such circumstances. Why did Mao Yao suddenly come here and want to kill Shengguan Jing? It seemed that there had been a long grudge between them. What was going on? Mao Yao sneered. You're extremely cunning and sinister. Back then, you deceived everyone and escaped a calamity. Today, you won't have that chance anymore. He would definitely not make the same mistake twice. Shengguan Jing spread his hands. I know you want that corpse, but it's not in my hands now. You're lying. Mao Yao did not believe his words at all. Back then, you spent so much effort to hide that corpse. If it's not in your hands, where is it? 1,000 years have passed. Shengguan Jing suddenly raised his voice. The world has changed. Things remain the same, but people have changed. Don't tell me you don't know what the primordial north region is like now? I've been in a deep sleep for 1,000 years. What happened? What did I lose? How did I control it? If you don't believe me, you can search me. As Shengguan Jing spoke, he lifted his foot and was about to walk out. Senior Shengguan. Elder Danqing hurriedly went forward and blocked his path. This is a serious matter. You must think twice. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan had come aggressively. Who knew if they would attack Shengguan Jing the moment he went out? This person was still in Lingxiao College. How could anything happen to him? Mao Yao stared at Shengguan Jing as if he wanted to see something from his face. However, both of them were old foxes. One hid his thoughts deeper than the other. No one could guess who was the other. Shengguan Jing, if you really have a clear conscience, come out directly. I have my ways to check if that corpse is on you. If that thing is really not with you, we'll forget about today's matter. But if we find out anything, don't blame us for being rude. Mao Yao could not be bothered to talk nonsense. At this moment, he did not rush forward, break the barrier, and drag Shengguan Jing over on account of Lingxiao College. No one knew how furious he was when he found out that Shengguan Jing was still alive. The next moment, Shengguan Jing said straightforwardly, "All right." Everyone present was shocked. Elder Danqing wanted to stop him again. Senior Shengguan, they're here to look for me. It has nothing to do with Lingxiao College or you. You don't have to get involved in this. Shengguan Jing said with a smile. Besides, I have a clear conscience. What's there to be afraid of? As he spoke, he looked at the elder in charge of guarding the barrier. The two elders looked at each other and finally opened the barrier hesitantly. Shengguan Jing took a step forward. Both sides were in a stalemate. Shengguan Jing opened his arms. If you want to investigate, just do it. Mao Yao sneered. Let's see how long you can be stubborn. As he spoke, he closed his eyes and crossed his hands in front of him. Then, a purple gold light bloomed in his palm. A piece of purple gold translucent scale flew into the air. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1501. The scale armor slowly flew around Shengguan Jing's body, as if it was checking something bit by bit. Shengguan Jing could feel a subtle force sweeping across his body, but his expression remained the same. He put one hand behind his back and raised his chin slightly, calm and composed. The corpse was indeed not with him now, so of course, nothing could be found. Mao Yao looked at the scale armor that did not have any reaction and gradually frowned. Could it be that it really was not there? But back then, Shengguan Jing had formed a grudge with them because of that corpse. How could he bear to give up just like that? Finally, the scale armor flew around Shengguan Jing, but it still did not find anything. Shengguan Jing laughed. How is it? Do you believe me now? Mao Yao's brows were still tightly knitted, and his face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost, cold to the bone. Who knows what method you used to hide it? This Shengguan Jing could even deceive them about his life and death. Hiding a corpse was not a small matter. The smile on Shengguan Jing's face faded a little. Mao Yao. What happened back then was indeed my fault, but I sincerely apologize to all of you. It was you who refused to forgive me and wanted to take my life no matter what. I had no choice but to choose to escape. As for me faking my death to deceive you. May I ask, who doesn't want to live well in this world? I don't think I deserve to die, so of course, I won't let you bully me to death. Moreover, I have been sleeping for 1,000 years. I don't know anything. It's no different from being dead. Even if it's to forgive me, it's enough. Today, you came to kill me without any reason. I tolerated it and even agreed to let you search me. This is enough to show my sincerity, right? What else do you want? His attitude had always been good before, but now he suddenly became tough, as if he had changed into a different person. The elders inside the barrier trembled with fear when they heard this. At this moment, he was still outside the barrier, only a short distance away from Mao Yao and the others. If they wanted to make a move, Shengguan Jing might not be able to escape successfully. At this moment, his words were sharp and even a little ear-piercing. The elders broke out in cold sweat for him. Mao Yao's expression changed as he stared at him for a long time. You really don't know? Shengguan Jing snorted. It's up to you to believe it or not. I've already said what I wanted to say. After saying this, he actually turned around and went back. Hey, you! The young men behind him were a little dissatisfied when they saw this. Just as they were about to say something, they were stopped by Mao Yao. In the territory of Lingxiao College, they had to give him some face. It was not appropriate to kill him directly. He had said that he did not want to kill Shengguan Jing by killing Shengguan Jing. He could kill him at any time, but it was more important to find his corpse. Is by luck. He frowned as countless guesses flashed through his mind. With a thought, the piece of scale flew back to him. However, just as the scale armor was about to fall back into his palm, it suddenly changed direction and flew towards the direction of the Spirit Firmament Academy. See! The sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. The scales drew a straight purple-gold line in the air. One of Shengguan Jing's feet had already stepped back into the boundary. His muscles tensed up when he heard the noise. A strong sense of danger welled up in his heart. Without thinking, he quickened his pace and entered. Seal the barrier. He let out a deep shout. The two elders who were in charge of guarding the barrier were shocked when they heard that. They instinctively attacked. However, they were fast, but the scale was even faster. In the blink of an eye, it had already flown in. Shengguan Jing immediately turned his head and saw a purple gold flash past his eyes. The next moment, that thing brushed past his cheek and flew in a certain direction in the academy. It was terrifyingly fast, causing Shengguan Jing's face to feel a slight but clear cut. He looked in the direction that the thing was flying, and his heart skipped a beat. It was flying towards Thousand Wine Mountain. Senior Shengguan, this, Elder Danqing was also momentarily stunned. Strengthen the barrier of the academy. Don't let them in. As Shengguan Jing spoke, he had already disappeared from the spot. He chased after that piece of scale. Behind him, outside the barrier, Mao Yao had already reacted. He gritted his teeth. It's really inside. Shengguan Jing, just you wait. Thousand Wine Mountain. Facing Elder Bo Yan's questioning, Chu Liuyue's hands in her sleeves quietly tightened. Previously, it was not that the elders did not suspect her. They had even called her to Thousand Wine Mountain to question her carefully. She had always denied it. Because there was no evidence and there were basically no major problems, most of the matters were left unsettled in the end. But it was different this time. Even though she didn't know what secrets were hidden in the spring, she could roughly guess from the current situation that this matter wasn't simple. Although the red-tailed red phoenix has the bloodline of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, it is almost 1 in 10,000 to successfully break through. As for yours, it completed its transformation in just a few months after entering the academy. Is this due to the power of Tianlei in the spring? Elder Bo Yan's question was very direct. Chu Liuyue's heart wavered. Qi. Just as she spoke, a cold wind suddenly blew from behind. Danger. Her heart skipped a beat and she immediately dodged to the side. At the same time, Rong Xiao had already made his move. A golden barrier quickly appeared around Chu Liyue. However, in the next moment, a crack appeared on the barrier. Chu Liyue turned around in shock and saw a purple-gold translucent scale that was extremely sharp and embedded into the barrier set up by Rong Xiao. The scale was half the size of an adult's palm. The edges were extremely thin and sharp. It was wrapped in a turbulent aura. Chu Liyue was very familiar with that aura. This was the scale of the great phoenix dragon. Crack. The barrier shattered. The scale went straight for Chu Liyue's dantian. Digression, everyone, have a good rest. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1502. Chu Liyue retreated without hesitation. However, that piece of scale followed her like a shadow and kept approaching her. Its speed was so fast that it was almost impossible to see its trace. She could only hear the sound of something breaking through the air. Black spatial cracks had already appeared in the sky. That was enough to show its power. Chu Liyue took a step back and retreated again. At the same time, golden light surged on her body. The pure gold sacred armor quickly wrapped around her body. She was exquisite and slender. Although she was still wearing men's clothes, she did not deliberately hide her figure after her identity was exposed. She might have been a little immature in the past. Yet now, she had almost completely matured. Every single move she made was breathtaking and graceful. Swoosh! That piece of scale flew straight at her. Chu Liyue bent her waist backward and her body instantly bent into an unimaginable arc chi. The scale armor brushed past her body by an inch, just barely scraping by. Chu Liyue could even feel the pain of her face being cut by this terrifying aura. The next moment, she straightened her body and half-turned her body. She raised her hand gently. A streak of pure gold flame suddenly gushed out from her palm. It quickly condensed into a wall of fire around her body. The raging fire burned fiercely, causing the surrounding temperature to rise instantly. Even the air seemed to be scorched. At the same time, a clear and bright cry spread far and wide between heaven and earth. Screech! A huge pure gold figure wrapped in raging fire appeared in front of Chu Liyue. It was Dumpling. It was as if the vast pressure from a distant time and space almost caused the space to collapse. Dumpling's appearance finally made that piece of scale stop its movement. However, it still floated in the air quietly and refused to retreat. It seemed to be in a confrontation with Dumpling. Seeing this scene, everyone in the school was shocked. That is the legendary ancient divine beast, the pure gold heavenly phoenix? Those rumors are actually true. Shengguanyu really made a contract with the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Ordinary people might not even have the chance to see a crimson gold heavenly phoenix in their lifetime, but Shengguanyu is actually able to form a contract with it. It really makes me feel bored even if I'm jealous. Her crimson gold celestial phoenix seems to have broken through from the previous crimson-tailed red phoenix. This kind of luck was truly unparalleled. Didn't Lu Yintong also have a red-tailed phoenix? However, it can't be compared to Shengguanyu. What's with that scale? It appeared so suddenly and fiercely. Seeing this, the people of the academy began to discuss something in low voices. As for Elder Bo Yen and the others in the air, their eyes were filled with shock and they could not react for a while. The scale armor that had suddenly appeared was definitely not an ordinary item. Just now, it had easily broken through Rong Xiu's barrier. Scales of this color, could it be? Elder Bo Yen suddenly thought of something and sucked in a cold breath. Chu Liuyue's eyes were solemn as she stared at the scale armor in front of her. The crimson gold heavenly phoenix and the great phoenix dragon were two great ancient divine beasts. Since ancient times, these two great clans had always been in a hostile relationship, and the competition between them was very intense. Of course, the other clans were not even qualified to participate in this battle. Therefore, only after Dumpling's appearance did the arrogant scale armor of the great phoenix dragon finally stop for the time being. It was rather wary of Dumpling. As for Dumpling, Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes slightly. Even though she was standing behind Dumpling and could not see its current expression, their minds were connected, and they did not need any extra words or actions to know each other's state of mind. She had almost never seen Dumpling so cautious and careful. Its temperament was jumpy, and after breaking through to become a crimson gold heavenly phoenix, it was even more undisciplined and free. Its noble bloodline allowed it to easily crush all other magical beasts, except for the great phoenix dragon. Just as this side was in a deadlock, Shengguan Jing had already flashed back. At a glance, he saw the scale armor floating quietly in front of Chu Liyue, and his heart sank. This thing was very sharp, and it actually found out that the corpse was now on This time, it would probably be very difficult to explain clearly. Roar. Just as everyone was in chaos, a deafening dragon roar suddenly came from above. Everyone was shocked and hurriedly raised their heads to look. In the sky not far away, a few figures were suspended in mid-air. They were unable to enter due to the academy's barrier. However, they were able to clearly see the situation within the academy just by standing there. Who is in charge of guarding the barrier today? They actually allowed them to go up. Elder Bo Yen reprimanded angrily. Outside the Ling Shao Academy, there was a huge enchantment. Under normal circumstances, everyone would enter from the side door. The top position was extremely sensitive, and no one was allowed to casually approach it. The defensive power of these places was basically the strongest. But now, Elder Hua Feng's heart suddenly jumped. Bo Yen. I'm afraid it's not that our people have neglected their duties, but they are too strong. The man in the lead seems to be the great phoenix dragon. Elder Bo Yen hadn't noticed it at first, but after his reminder, he hurriedly looked over. His heart sank as soon as he took a look at it. Purple gold scales, dragon roars. If it wasn't the great phoenix dragon, who could it be? Then, he suddenly turned around. That scale armor should also be the great phoenix dragon's? But why did they target Shengguan Yu? Right at this moment, Elder Danqing also hurried back. His face was a little pale. Bo Yen, our people couldn't stop them. The great phoenix dragon race was really too strong. Especially that one was the famous Mao Yao. Actually, many people didn't know this name. After all, it was something that happened 1,000 years ago. If they didn't specifically understand it, ordinary people wouldn't know so much. However, they understood the words, Great Void Phoenix Dragon. For a moment, everyone in Qingming Square was shocked speechless. Great Phoenix Dragon, hadn't it not appeared in the world for a long, long time? Why did it suddenly appear today? And the moment it appeared, it went straight for Lingshao College. Thinking back to the series of events just now, it wasn't difficult to guess that the true target of the Great Phoenix Dragon this time was actually Shengguan Jing and Shengguan Yu. Didn't they just solve the problems of the various families in Fangzhou City? It hadn't even been a day, so how did they provoke this Great Phoenix Dragon again? Elder Bo Yan's mind raced as he frowned. This Great Phoenix Dragon appeared at the wrong time. He moved forward and cupped his hands at Mao Yao and the others. He was very polite. So it's Senior Mao Yao who came from afar. We hope you can forgive us for not welcoming you. Mao Yao only glanced at him indifferently before looking at Chu Luiyue. A cold smile crept up the corner of his mouth. That thing is on you? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1503. He didn't say what it was, but Chu Luiyue immediately understood. What else could make the great Phoenix Dragon clan spend so much effort to hunt it down other than that corpse? Chu Luiyue pursed her lips. But Mao Yao didn't seem interested in her answer. The reaction of that scale was enough to explain everything. He sized up Chu Luiyue and then looked at Shengwan Jing, who was not far away. His eyes became more and more sarcastic. So it's the same bloodline. Shengwan Jing, you're so generous to your descendants. You're actually willing to give away such a thing. Thinking about it carefully, this was actually normal. Who knew what kind of storm the great Phoenix Dragon's corpse would cause if it was spread out? Only one's own people were the most reliable. To think that he almost believed Shengwan Jing's absurd lie just now. From the beginning to the end, he had never thought of returning it. Shengwan Jing's expression was cold. He flew in front of Chu Luiyue and blocked her behind him. Mao Yao, if you have any problems, come at me. Don't involve others. Others? She's your descendant. How can she be considered as others? Moreover, the thing is with her. Mao Yao raised his hand and pointed at Chu Luiyue. The scales on the back of his hand shone with a sparkling light, sharp and cold. No wonder you're so bold. So you're relying on the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix's support. The moment he saw Dumpling, a trace of disgust flashed across Mao Yao's eyes. As an ancient divine beast, you actually made a contract with a despicable and lowly human. You're really degenerating. Boom. The flames on Dumpling's body suddenly rose. Her eyes were also filled with surging anger. It was fine to talk about it, but definitely not to slander her. Pfft, look at you, do you really think of yourself as a dog of the human race? I really don't know what those old things in the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan are doing. They actually allowed their clansmen to do such a thing. Even if you don't find it embarrassing, I feel ashamed for you. Magical beasts were hostile to humans, not to mention ancient divine beasts. Because of their noble bloodline, they were used to looking down on everyone. In addition to what had happened to Shengwan Jing, Mao Yao had a deep prejudice and hatred against the human race. At this moment, his words were naturally exceptionally unpleasant to the ears. Tuanzi let out a sharp cry from its throat. It flapped its wings as if it was about to rush out and have a showdown with the other party. Dumpling. Chu Luiyue's voice was exceptionally cold and calm. Dumpling was filled with unwillingness, but she could only endure it. Chu Luiyue gently stroked its wings. Dumpling gradually calmed down. Then, Chu Luiyue stepped forward. You, Shengwan Jing asked worriedly. Chu Luiyue chuckled. Rest assured, I merely have some things that I wish to say to this person. Seeing her calm eyes, Shengwan Jing was slightly relieved. After hesitating for a moment, he finally nodded. Chu Luiyue took another step forward and looked up at Mao Yao. I heard that Senior Mao Yao has an extremely high status in the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race. But I didn't know when you started to care about the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan as well. Dumpling has followed me for many years. From a 9-colored heavenly pheasant back then, she grew and broke through to become the current Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. With just one sentence, you want to erase our many years of friendship. Isn't that too much? Mao Yao was shocked. His eyes swept back and forth between Dumpling and Chu Luiyue. This Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix actually broke through from a 9-colored heavenly pheasant? If that was the case, then others really had no right to stand out and criticize. His face tensed up. Even so, now that she's a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix, she naturally has to follow the rules of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Don't you know that after she breaks through, she should go to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan to acknowledge her ancestors? Chu Luyue froze and looked at Dumpling. She really didn't know about this. Dumpling lowered its head and rubbed against her shoulder gently. Actually, after its bloodline completely awakened, it already knew about this. But because Chu Luyue had been in constant trouble, it didn't mention it. It originally wanted to find a chance to talk to her after all these messy things were over, but unexpectedly, Chu Luyue's mind was connected to Dumpling's, so naturally, she immediately understood what Dumpling was thinking. Her heart warmed, and she immediately looked at Mao Yao with a chuckle. Senior Mao Yao, I wonder if you've heard of this saying, the eunuch is more anxious than the emperor. We're not in a hurry to do this, but as a great void phoenix dragon, you're very anxious. Mao Yao's expression changed. How dare you? Chu Luyue's expression was indifferent. This is the first time you're seeing me. Perhaps you're not used to it. After a long time, you'll know that I'm used to being impudent and never like to bow down to others. Especially, people who are already rude to me. They were here to kill her. Did she have to welcome them with a smile? She didn't treat herself as a human being. You. Mao Yao's face turned red with anger. This pair of grandfather and grandson were both masters who could infuriate people to death without paying for it. The old one was already like that, but the young one was even worse. Arrogant. Really arrogant. He took a deep breath and looked at Elder Bo Yen. You're the dean of Lingxiao College? Elder Bo Yen frowned. The dean is out traveling and is not here now. I'm Bo Yen, and I'm in charge of everything in Lingxiao College for the time being. Senior Mao Yao, is there any misunderstanding here? Why don't we all calm down and sit down to talk? Misunderstanding? Mao Yao sneered. You can ask the two of them what good things they've done. Elder Bo Yen felt a little uneasy. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon race boasted of their noble status and rarely interfered in the affairs of the human race. This time, they actually charged over directly. Something must have really happened. On account of Lingxiao College, I'll give you a chance. Hand over the two of them immediately. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Mao Yao's attitude was very firm. From the looks of it, if they didn't do as he said, he might really do anything. Elder Bo Yen looked at Shengwan Jing with a grave expression. Senior Shengwan, what's going on? Shengwan Jing frowned as if he was thinking about how to deal with the situation in front of him. Actually, it's not a big deal. Chu Luyue suddenly spoke. Everyone looked over, their hearts filled with sorrow. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon race had already been forced to charge here. How was it not a big deal? Chu Luyue tucked her loose strands of hair behind her ears and calmly said, It's fine. 1,000 years ago, Taizu accidentally obtained the corpse of a Great Void Phoenix Dragon. Taizu originally planned to return it, but Senior Mao Yao said that he wanted to take his life no matter what. Helpless, Taizu could only choose to escape. And that corpse never had the chance to be returned. Until today, 1,000 years later, Taizu woke up and Senior Mao Yao and the others chased after them again. Elder Bo Yen trembled with fear when he heard that. Then why don't we make peace on account of the academy? Senior Shengwan, if you return that corpse, Senior Mao Yao will also let it go. How about that? Nothing. Chu Luyue rejected this suggestion and said indifferently, I've already used the wing bones of that corpse. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1505. Originally, he thought that with the barrier separating them, he would still be somewhat safe. Who knew that Mao Yao would use such a method? Not only did he transform his real body into a piece of scale armor and barge into Ling Xiao Academy, but he even wanted to attack Chu Luiyue without saying a word. How could Ling Xiao College not react? A huge and muscular figure appeared in mid-air. That dragon was covered in purplish gold dragon scales. Its claws were sharp, and its aura was shocking. His eyes were a deep black with a hint of purple, giving him a sense of mystery. It was cold, arrogant, and indifferent. Its speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of Chu Luiyue. At the same time, it let out a low and oppressive dragon roar. Roar! In an instant, a terrifying force surged from all directions. The space around Chu Luiyue was instantly compressed. Her chest felt stuffy, and it seemed that the force in her body had become slow and stagnant. The next moment, an indescribably heavy force came crashing down. Chu Luiyue's figure flew out instantly. Be careful!" Shengguan Jing exclaimed. Chu Luiyue only felt a blur in front of her eyes, and her body retreated uncontrollably. However, this state did not last for long. A gentle and strong force quickly supported her waist, helping to remove that shocking force. Then, she fell into a broad and warm embrace. A familiar cold fragrance came, and it made her feel at ease. Chu Luiyue looked back and saw Rong Xiu looking ahead coldly, and his murderous intent was overflowing. "Senior Mao Yao, think carefully before you attack. Is now my Yuntian Tower's princess consort. If you hurt or kill her, you will completely break with my Yuntian Tower." His voice was low and powerful, and every word was like thunder. The surroundings were silent for a moment. Obviously, no one expected Rong Xiu to be so decisive. He directly blocked the entire Yuntian Tower. A trace of astonishment flashed across the pair of dragon eyes. Yuntian Tower? Princess? After Mao Yao sensed that Shengguan Jing was still alive, he led his men to chase after him. He didn't have time to learn anything else. Therefore, he did not know that Chu Luiyue had such an identity. The Yuntian Tower was a peak existence among the first-rate families in the Divine Ruins. Even someone as powerful as the Great Phoenix Dragon had to be wary of him. It would have been fine if she was just an ordinary person, but the key point was that this woman was actually a princess. This was going to be tricky. Mao Yao's eyes were still filled with anger. Even so, she dared to use the corpses of my Great Phoenix Dragon race. She deserves death. I can't let this matter go just like that. We never intended to shirk our responsibilities. Shengguan Jing heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Rong Xiu save Chu Luiyue in time. In a flash, he appeared in front of Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue, confronting Mao Yao. "Mao Yao. We've let you down, and we've shown our sincerity to negotiate a solution with you. But if you're still so stubborn, then there's nothing to talk about." Elder Bo Yen had also reacted. He quickly followed up and said in a low voice. "Senior Mao Yao, we respect your honorable status, but it doesn't mean that we'll tolerate you doing whatever you want in Lingxiao College's territory. If you act wantonly again, we won't sit still and wait for death." Mao Yao was so angry that he panted heavily. Were the people of the Shengguan clan sick in the head? They were clearly the ones in the wrong, but why did they still speak like they were the boss? But this matter was really not easy to deal with. On one hand, the Yuntian Tower clearly wanted to support her. On the other hand, they were now in Lingxiao College. They were indeed in the wrong if they suddenly attacked. Both sides were in a stalemate. The many students who were watching below all held their breaths. They were extremely nervous. Before this, who would have thought that they would actually see such a crazy scene in Lingxiao College with their own eyes? In the silence, Chu Luiyue gently patted Rong Xiu's hand. Rong Xiu glanced at her and frowned slightly. Chu Luiyue smiled and shook her head, giving him a reassuring look. Rong Xiu then reluctantly let go of his hand. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and took half a step forward. Taizu, Elder Bo Yen, I've said before that since this matter started because of me, then it's only right for me to bear the responsibility and solve it. Shengguan Jing and Elder Bo Yen looked at each other. They wanted to say something but stopped. How could this matter be so simple? Chu Luiyue didn't seem to care about the two's response. Her gaze was fixed on Mao Yao. Senior Mao Yao, I'm afraid it's a little difficult for you to make me pay with my life. Why don't we use another method? As long as I can do it, I'll do my best to make up for it. She said it sincerely and seriously, but in Mao Yao's ears, it sounded like a joke. Make up for it? With just you? Chu Luiyue nodded. With just me. Mao Yao wanted to sneer, but when he saw that pair of dark and calm eyes, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. For some reason, he couldn't laugh anymore. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Actually, Shengguan Yu was right about one thing. With the protection of Yun Tianke and the Spirit Firmament Academy, it was impossible to take her life just by relying on this. Then, indeed, he could only use another method to make up for it. All right then. Since you've said so, I have two requests. As long as you can do it, this matter will be over. Chu Luiyue nodded. Please speak. Mao Yao stared at her. First, you have to retrieve the used bone from the legendary three-eyed eagle's body. Together with the rest of the corpses, they were returned in one piece. Second, I can spare your life, but as a punishment, you have to withstand 3 of my moves. As long as you can endure it, this grudge will be over. Before Chu Luiyue could speak, Shengguan Jing could no longer hold back. Mao Yao. Don't go overboard. What level are you and what level is you, If you let you, withstand 3 of your moves, aren't you openly asking for her life? If you want to talk, then talk properly. Otherwise, don't talk so much nonsense. You're wasting everyone's time. Shengguan Jing was really angry. Mao Yao was an important existence in the great Phoenix Dragon race. His status was noble and his strength was tyrannical. However, Yu was only at the intermediate stage of the 9th level now. Not to mention 3 moves, in one move, he was afraid that she would, Mao Yao sneered. Why? You can't accept it? Don't forget, she was the one who said that she would take responsibility for her own actions. Didn't you say that you were ambitious and unyielding just now? Why are you suddenly afraid now? I've also made it clear. If you really want to reconcile, agree to my conditions. If you don't, what I said earlier still counts. I also sincerely want to reconcile with you. Chu Luiyue suddenly spoke and interrupted Mao Yao. However, I can only agree to the second of your 2 conditions. Zichen is my contracted fiend. Since I've helped him reconstruct his body, I definitely won't let anyone destroy him. I can't, and I won't allow anyone else. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1506. After Chu Luiyue said this, the surroundings instantly fell silent. Even Mao Yao's eyes showed some astonishment. These 2 conditions, you rejected the first and accepted the second? Are you sure? Chu Luiyue nodded. This is my bottom line, and I will not back down. If you think it's inappropriate, then, I can't do anything about it. Mao Yao stared at Chu Luiyue with a strange expression. In fact, these 2 conditions were casually mentioned by him. Because he thought that Chu Luiyue would definitely not accept the second condition. What was the difference between that and courting death? But he didn't expect her to refute the first condition. A wave of fluctuation suddenly surged from her dantian. Zichen's voice was deeper and sharper than usual, as if he was suppressing something. If it wants the wing bone, I'll return it. There's no need for you to pay with your life. Don't mess around. Chu Luiyue said softly in her heart. I spent a lot of effort to reconstruct your physical body. How can I give it up just like that? Besides, the wing bone of the great phoenix dragon is not so easy to obtain. Such an opportunity, if missed once, would not come again in the future. She couldn't bear to part with it. But, with your current strength, you can't take 3 of its moves. Zichen's voice was tinged with a hint of urgency. It was a divine beast, and it had fused with 2 wing bones of the great phoenix dragon. It knew too well how powerful this race was. Yes, Chu Luiyue was much stronger than cultivators of the same level, and could even fight against those of a higher level. Although it was only at the intermediate stage of the 9th stage, it had the strength to fight against a demigod, or even a supreme god. But Mao Yao, even an exalted god expert, might not be a match for it. If Chu Luiyue agreed, she would be gambling with her life. I'm not going to fight it alone. Chu Luiyue smiled. Others may not know, but don't you know? I have quite a few trump cards on me, so I might be able to withstand these 3 moves. In any case, as long as he could get through this, all grudges would be resolved, and everything would be fine. But it's still too dangerous. If it goes all out, you might not even have the time or opportunity to use your trump card. Zichen was still strongly against it. I'm just a half-dead soul. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have the chance to see the light of day again. You've already helped me too much. I can't, Zichen, do you really think it just wants the corpse back? Chu Luiyue suddenly asked softly. Zichen choked. 1,000 years ago, the Taizu didn't do anything to the corpse and even expressed their willingness to return it. However, they still said that they wanted the Taizu dead no matter what. If it were me, I'd do the same. Even if I sacrifice you and return your corpse to them, this matter will not end. What they want is for the great phoenix dragon to always be high and mighty, and for others to always be subservient before them. At a time like this, it's useless to say or do anything. Only by confronting them head-on can we have a glimmer of hope of survival. She was willing to agree to Mao Yao's outrageous request because it had said it in front of so many people. No matter what the outcome was, she had to admit it. This was her only chance to turn the tables. Zichen was silent for a long time. I live and die with the Lord. Chu Luiyue exhaled softly. Suddenly, something came close to her cheek. Chu Luiyue turned her head and smiled as she patted Dumpling's head. With me around, this time, there will only be life and death. Perhaps it was the smile on her face that provoked Mao Yao. It was hot-headed and gritted its teeth as it agreed. Okay. If you can really survive my 3 moves, we won't pursue the matter of the corpse anymore. New and old grudges will be settled. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. It's a deal. Crazy. She was really crazy. After Chu Luiyue's voice fell, almost everyone widened their eyes in shock. They couldn't believe their ears. With the strength of a middle stage 9th stage, she took the punishment of 3 moves from the great phoenix dragon. Was she already prepared to die, or did she think too highly of herself? Everyone knew what had happened in Fangzhou City earlier, and they all knew that her strength was indeed not bad. But it also depended on who she was compared to. Facing the great phoenix dragon head-on, and the famous Mao Yao. Wasn't she courting death? Elder Wanzheng and the others also turned slightly pale. They wanted to persuade her, but seeing Chu Luiyue's determined expression, as if she had already made up her mind, they didn't know what to say for a moment. This was too ridiculous. Chu Luiyue didn't care about everyone's reaction. She looked left and right before she moved and chose a relatively empty spot. Please don't affect others when you attack later. Mao Yao was so angry that he almost laughed. You'd better take care of yourself first. Chu Luiyue's lips curved. Thank you for your concern. Mao Yao's chest tightened. He finally realized that Shengguan Yu needed to be taught a lesson. Now that she was sharp-tongued, she was very powerful. Let's see if she can still be so carefree later. It moved and flew in front of Chu Luiyue. The woman and the dragon faced each other from afar. Chu Luiyue cupped her hands. Please. Arrogant. Mao Yao sneered in his heart. In the next moment, it swung its dragon tail and headed straight for Chu Luiyue. Wherever the purple-gold dragon tail passed, the space collapsed inch by inch. Swoosh! Chu Luiyue held the scarlet cloud sword tightly in one hand and summoned the black shield at the same time. It stood in front of her. Digression: tomorrow at 12:00 mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1507. Compared to the huge dragon tail, Chu Luiyue's figure seemed especially small. The scales on the purple-gold dragon tail flickered with a dazzling cold light, and it came with a fierce aura. Immediately after, several streams of light flew out and surrounded Chu Luiyue. From afar, she seemed to be trapped in a translucent purple-gold ball of light. In an instant, the space around Chu Luiyue seemed to be controlled by this power and quickly froze. Even the force in Chu Luiyue's body almost stopped flowing. Chu Luiyue's heart jumped. The great phoenix dragon's god realm was actually so domineering. When she encountered other divine beasts or cultivators who used their god realm, Chu Luiyue still had some room to move. However, in front of the great phoenix dragon, everything was in vain. It was extremely difficult for her to even move her feet. Chu Luiyue frantically urged the force in her body to circulate. However, after spending a lot of effort, it seemed that there was still no effect. At this moment, the force in her body was like the surface of a lake that was completely frozen. It could not cause any ripples at all. Gradually, her forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat, and her lips were faintly pale. Mao Yao looked at her and sneered. You overestimate yourself. Why did she think that the great phoenix dragon race was an ancient divine beast? When she agreed to the second condition, she should have been prepared to die. Now, it was just the beginning, and she already had no strength to fight back. There was no need to mention what would happen next. Swoosh! The huge dragon tail had already swung in front of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue could even feel the biting cold wind coming from all directions. It was as if it was going to crush her. Suddenly, a boundary formed by reddish-gold flames appeared around Chu Luiyue. The blazing temperature almost caused half the sky to become dry and dry. The smell of burning filled the air, making people feel anxious. Screech! Following this clear cry, Dumpling spread out her arms and stood in front of Chu Luiyue, protecting her firmly behind her. In its eyes, there was no longer any of its usual laziness. Instead, there was only endless battle intent. The feathers on its body burned with scarlet gold flames. A vast pressure descended. Seeing Dumpling appear, a trace of fear flashed in Mao Yao's eyes, but soon after, he sneered. For the sake of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, I'll give you a chance. As long as you step aside immediately, I'll spare your life. Dumpling didn't say anything. She only flapped her wings and charged towards Mao Yao. Idiot! Mao Yao coldly rebuked. The relationship between the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan and the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race had always been subtle. Most of the time, both sides minded their own business and appeared to be calm and peaceful. But in reality, the battles in the open and in the dark had never stopped. It didn't like Dumpling to begin with. However, it didn't want to cause a dispute between the two races, so it gave her a chance to compromise. Unfortunately, the other party didn't like it. In that case, it had nothing to say. How could a mere young Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix cause such a huge commotion? However, at this moment, a huge black figure suddenly appeared in mid-air. The cold air was so cold that it covered the sky and the sun. Legendary Three-Eyed Eagle. When Mao Yao saw Zichen appear, deep hatred burst out from its eyes. Because it had already sensed a familiar aura from the other party. The great void phoenix dragon's corpse was indeed in the legendary three-eyed eagle's body. Dumpling and Zichen attacked from both sides together. A reddish-gold flame whip lashed out and wrapped around Mao Yao's dragon tail. Mao Yao swung it angrily and broke free. How dare you embarrass yourself with such petty tricks? The dragon's tail was about to hit Tuan Zi. Zichen immediately stepped forward and swept past Mao Yao's dragon tail. Whoosh! Its extremely sharp claws scratched Mao Yao's body. It made an ear-piercing sound. How dare you! Mao Yao was enraged. His figure turned, originally wanting to directly entangle Zichen, but Zichen's speed was too fast, and he pounced at empty air. It looked down and saw a white scratch on its dragon tail. In the eyes of everyone, Zichen's attack didn't make Mao Yao bleed. It was like scratching an itch. The difference in strength was obvious. However, Mao Yao didn't think so. The great void phoenix dragon's level was much higher than the legendary three-eyed eagle's, and its strength was far above the other parties. Now that it was caught like this, Mao Yao felt that it was a great humiliation. It was furious and simply changed direction. Its body moved, and its dragon tail slammed heavily on Zichen's body. Smack! With a muffled sound, Zichen's body was instantly sent flying. Bang! Zichen crashed into the middle of the Thousand Wine Mountain. For a moment, rocks flew everywhere, black feathers flew, and blood stains were everywhere. It struggled to get up, but found that several of its bones were broken. In some places, its flesh was overturned, and broken bones could even be seen sticking out diagonally. It was a ghastly sight. Everyone was trembling with fear. In their impression, the legendary three-eyed eagle was considered an extremely powerful divine beast. Especially the one that Chu Luiyue had contracted. It was the legendary eagle master, and its strength was definitely one of the best among the legendary three-eyed eagles. However, such a divine beast couldn't even withstand a single blow from the great void phoenix dragon. Let alone Chu Luiyue. Elder Wanzheng and the others watched from the side and were all sweating. After shaking off Zichen, Mao Yao focused his attention on Chu Luiyue again. At this moment, Chu Luiyue was still desperately trying to mobilize the force in her body. Traces of force gushed out from her energy center and poured into the shield and scarlet cloud sword. Even if they help you, it's just a waste of energy. As Mao Yao spoke, his dragon tail swung out again. This time, its speed was much faster than before. Before the crowd could even see it clearly, they could only vaguely see a purple-gold rainbow streak across the sky. In the next moment, the terrifying force was already closing in on Chu Luiyue. The golden flames around Chu Luiyue were torn apart by the strong wind. Her body was completely exposed in front of Mao Yao. At this moment, Chu Luiyue's vision blurred. Bang! Dumpling stood in front of Chu Luiyue and took the hit. Dumpling! Chu Luiyue exclaimed. Dumpling was also violently shaken off. Although the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix and the Great Void Phoenix Dragon were ancient divine beasts of the same level, Dumpling had just broken through not long ago. Whether it was in terms of strength or experience, she couldn't be compared to Mao Yao. Before Chu Luiyue had time to check on Dumpling's injuries, she felt a cold wind coming from the front. She looked up and saw that the dragon tail was already closing in on her face. She made a prompt decision and raised the black shield, completely hiding her figure within it. Boom! The dragon tail slammed heavily on the shield. Chu Luiyue's entire arm instantly went numb. The qi and blood in her body were in a mess, and she suddenly vomited blood. The warm, crimson blood fell on the black shield and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1508. Chu Luyue did not see this scene. Mao Yao's attack was too ferocious. Her vision turned black, and she could not see anything. Her internal organs seemed to be squeezed together by an invisible force, and she did not know when they would explode. Pain. It was too painful. Chu Luyue gritted her teeth, and there was a roaring sound in her ears. For a moment, her mind was in a mess. However, the last bit of reason she had left made her grip on the black shield tightly. She knew that this was her life-saving straw. The surroundings seemed to be quiet for a moment. Chu Luyue did not care much. After she recovered a little, she quickly looked at her left arm. There were several cracks on the golden armor. On half of her arm, there were also several small wounds, and blood was flowing out. This was caused by the terrifying force that she had endured in an instant. The pure gold armor had helped to dissipate most of the force, but the remaining force was still not something that Chu Luyue's body could withstand. Her bones seemed to be broken. Chu Luyue gritted her teeth and quickly took out an elixir from her universe ring. At the same time, she switched to her other hand and switched to the red cloud sword. If it happened again, she might not be able to keep her arm. The thick smell of blood between her lips and teeth made Chu Luyue feel a little suffocated and nauseous. She spat out a mouthful of blood, looked up, and said word by word, "I'll take the first move. Senior Mao Yao, please." Mao Yao looked at her in shock and doubt. To be precise, he was looking at the black shield in front of her. No one knew better than him just how powerful that attack was. The legendary three-eyed eagle and the pure gold phoenix were easily shaken off one after another, and they had no power to fight back. Even if a part of the energy had been consumed, it was still easy to crush Sheng Wanyu. She was just a middle-stage 9th stage. But now, not only was she not dead, she even had the strength to continue standing there. And she was asking for the second move. Mao Yao felt that it was ridiculous at first, and then he was deeply shocked and suspicious. There was clearly something wrong with that black shield. At first glance, it was just a slightly shabby and ordinary shield. It was completely black and dim. There were no special patterns on it, only the messy marks of swords and sabers. It seemed to have been left behind after a fierce battle. It seemed to be quite old, but Mao Yao stared at it for a while, but he still couldn't figure out anything specific. This made it feel a little uneasy. Although it was not a weapon refiner, it had seen countless treasures in the past 1,000 years, so it could definitely be considered to have good eyesight. However, it was unable to identify the origin of this black shield. After a brief moment of dead silence, the crowd fell into an uproar. Am I seeing things? Sheng Wanyu actually took the first move of the Great Phoenix Dragon. Although she's injured, she's conscious and can speak clearly. She's definitely accepted the challenge. My God! Isn't she at the middle stage of the 9th step? Why is he so powerful? I think it's not that she's powerful, but that her trump card is more powerful. The legendary three-eyed eagle and the crimson gold heavenly phoenix helped to block a lot of the attack, so the attack didn't really land on her. Tisk! So jealous. Who do you think attacked her? Mao Yao. That's an important existence in the Great Phoenix Dragon race. If you or I were to take the attack, I'm afraid we would have been turned into ashes. I was just saying. Moreover, what I said is actually not wrong. I think the reason why Sheng Wanyu was able to withstand this attack was largely due to the help of the two mythical beasts. And that black shield of hers didn't crack. I'm afraid it's not an ordinary item. No matter what, she managed to withstand the attack. The key is: what should we do with the remaining two moves? Anyone with eyes could see that the two mythological beasts were seriously injured and should not be able to fight anymore. Without their help, Sheng Wanyu would probably. I didn't expect you to have such a treasure. No wonder you're so confident. Mao Yao said in a deep voice. It's a pity that you're only at the mid-stage of the 9th stage. You don't have divine power, and your origin power is suppressed by my god domain, so you can't use it. In your hands, you can only use 10 to 20% of its power. Mao Yao indeed felt that Chu Liuyue's black shield should not be underestimated. However, this did not have much of an impact on the final result. Even if the black shield could withstand its attack, Chu Liyue, who was holding the shield, didn't have enough strength to withstand the residual energy. They couldn't even withstand a single blow. Let's see how long you can be so arrogant without the help of others. After Mao Yao finished speaking, a dazzling light suddenly erupted from his body. Dragon armor kill. Swish. Swish. Several scales suddenly flew out at the same time. Streaks of light streaked across the sky and headed straight for Chu Liyue. It blotted out the sky and covered the earth. In an instant, it completely enveloped her figure. At a glance, the sky was filled with specks of purplish gold light. It was dazzling and magnificent. However, the murderous intent contained within it made people shrink back and tremble in fear. Wherever the scales passed, the space would shatter. The pressure was overwhelming. If one was hit by the sharp scales, a piece of flesh would be sliced off easily. Moreover, there were so many of them. It was tantamount to dismemberment. Everyone was shocked when they saw this. This time, Mao Yao was serious. Previously, Mao Yao had not taken Chu Liyue seriously and had just casually attacked her. Who knew that she would be able to withstand it? Mao Yao felt deeply humiliated. Hence, he had put in a lot of effort into this second attack. It's time to end this. Following Mao Yao's shout, Chu Liyue's figure was completely surrounded by the scales that filled the sky. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1509. The black shield could block attacks from one direction, but it could not protect her from all directions. Hence, Mao Yao directly used this move. What he wanted, was to directly take her life. This was the first time he had let his guard down and failed to finish her off. A second time, the same thing must not happen again. Mao Yao let out a deep dragon roar from his throat. His pair of dragon eyes stared fixedly at the cluster of light formed by the purple gold scales. He could not wait to see the ending. The scales flew back and forth, entangling with each other and shuttling back and forth at an alarming speed. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts. After all this, Sheng Guanyu, who was inside, would most likely be in grave danger. Mao Yao is determined to kill Sheng Guanyu this time. He wants Sheng Guanyu dead no matter what. I don't think she can survive the second move. Her two mythical beasts can't even take care of themselves and can't help her. What else can she do? In the end, she can't blame anyone for this. She used the great phoenix dragon's corpse to reconstruct the bodies of her mythical beasts. How bold must she be to do such a thing? Most importantly, she did it and even admitted to it so openly. Do you think he will let her off so easily? What else can she do? This matter will be exposed sooner or later. The longer she keeps it a secret, the more dangerous it will be. She might as well say it directly. I think Sheng Guanyu is just talented and has a fast breakthrough. She thinks too highly of herself. Does she really think that she can fight the great phoenix dragon head-on just because she knows some martial arts? Think about it. She has caused a lot of trouble for Lingxiao College recently. She is young and arrogant. She will eventually suffer. Everyone in Qingming Square was talking about all kinds of things. Mu Hongyu was so angry that her face turned red and her chest heaved violently. What do you know? She is not that kind of person. Her angry rebuke silenced the crowd. Quite a number of people looked at Mu Hongyu with different expressions. Finally, someone said. If she isn't like that, why would she do all these things? Besides, it's useless to say all these now, right? Whether she can survive or not is up in the air. Mu Hongyu clenched her fists. These people, of course she can survive. A calm and indifferent voice suddenly sounded. Mu Hongyu was stunned, and the surrounding people also looked in the direction of the voice. The one who spoke was a tall and thin young man. He was dressed in a long green robe. His facial features were sparse, and his temperament was elegant. He had a scholarly air about him. Lin Qifei? Are you speaking up for Shangguanyu? Someone asked. Lin Qifei smiled faintly. I was only telling the truth. Not to mention that Rong Xiao and the others were here. They would never let anything happen to her. Even she herself would never do anything she wasn't confident in. TSK, what truth? I think it won't be long before that Shangguanyu will, look. Before that person could finish his mocking words, he was suddenly interrupted. Everyone subconsciously looked up. The next moment, they were all shocked. In the sky, a crack suddenly appeared in the light ball formed by the purplish gold scales. A cluster of transparent flames suddenly emerged from the crack. In an instant, the transparent flames spread and covered the scales, devouring them. Then, everyone saw that the scales, which were originally very powerful, began to weaken at a speed visible to the naked eye. The dazzling light on the scales also quickly dimmed. That's Elder Bo Yen and the others were also shocked by the scene in front of them. Elder Wanzheng suddenly thought of something and exclaimed in shock, could it be crack? A crisp sound could be heard all of a sudden. Then, the crowd saw a piece of purple gold scale armor shatter. After being enveloped by the transparent flames, the scale's power was quickly devoured and became very brittle. Just a slight movement could shatter it. At this moment, all the noises in the room disappeared. Heaven and earth were silent. Mao Yao's eyes widened. His originally cold and indifferent eyes were now filled with disbelief. How could, boom. Following a loud explosion, the transparent flames crazily surged in all directions. The scales that were encircled together were so fragile that they could not withstand a single blow. Like a flood breaking through a dam, everything began to develop in an unpredictable direction. Everyone stared at the sky with their mouths agape. There, in the crazily surging transparent flames, stood a slender and straight figure. Her clothes and hair were fluttering in the wind. It was Chu Luiyue. Her face and body were stained with bloodstains, and the golden armor on her body was already in tatters. Her face was as pale as snow. Only a pair of black jade-like eyes, as deep as a cold lake, were surging with a shocking battle intent. She was obviously in a terrible state, but people could not help but respect and submit to her. Some people, even if they were covered in wounds, were still incomparably honorable. In front of her, a small transparent square cauldron was floating quietly. The terrifying transparent flames were obviously surging out from it. The heavenly square cauldron. Mao Yao exclaimed in shock. He did not know what had happened in Fangzhou City earlier. So when he suddenly saw it, he was naturally very surprised. Chu Liuyue's lips suddenly curled up into a wild and arrogant smile. Senior Mao Yao, to be honest, I have been waiting for this day for a long time. Finally, he could finally use this trump card in an open and above-board manner. Digression, the backstage was spammed for 10 minutes before it came out. 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 15:10. Mao Yao didn't expect Chu Luiyue to have such a sacred artifact on her. The heavenly square cauldron had been lost in the divine ruins world for thousands of years. Countless people had searched for it, but to no avail. He didn't expect it to be with her. Although Mao Yao didn't know much about the outside world, he knew Shangguan Jing well. Shangguan Jing might be powerful, but he was an outsider and didn't have an impressive background. Back then, when he had just made a name for himself in the divine ruins world, he had fought an earth-shattering battle with them. Since then, he had stayed in the primeval north region. Although Shengguan Jing hadn't really died in the past 1,000 years, he had been trapped in the primeval north region without knowing anything. It was no different from being dead. Therefore, it was impossible for her to do anything for Shengguan Yu. In other words, Shengguan Yu was also an outsider. She was just a teenage girl with an ordinary background. Although she was talented, her strength wasn't top-notch. At the very least, she wasn't strong enough to do whatever she wanted in the Divine Ruins world. That was why Mao Yao didn't think much of her. At this moment, when he saw the black shield and the heavenly square cauldron, Mao Yao finally realized that he had underestimated Shengguan Yu. When Elder Bo Yen and the others saw this scene, they were stunned and couldn't recover for a long time. Although they already knew that the heavenly square cauldron was with Chu Luyue, this was the first time they saw it. It was one of the legendary 10 great sacred artifacts. It was a supreme treasure that countless cultivators vied for. It was indeed worthy of its reputation. It actually helped Chu Luyue block this attack. With a thought, Chu Luyue pulled the raging transparent flames back into the heavenly square cauldron. Even the scales were sucked into it. Mao Yao panicked. Shengguan Yu. What are you trying to do? Chu Luyue coughed lightly and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He smiled and said, "You are very smart. Don't you know what I want to do? Of course, I want to keep these scales. How dare you?" Mao Yao was so angry that his eyes turned red. Those scales were left behind from its previous metamorphosis, and they had an extraordinary meaning to it. If Chu Luyue was sucked into the heavenly square cauldron, he would definitely be destroyed. Chu Luyue paused in her actions. Even though her face was as pale as snow, there was still a smile on her lips. Earlier, you said that as long as I could withstand 3 of your attacks, you would let bygones be bygones. But you didn't say that I can't retaliate? Besides, this shouldn't be considered a counterattack. Wasn't she just going to keep these scales? What was the big deal? You sly! Mao Yao shouted. You are indeed as treacherous as Shengguan Jing. Long S's. Long tts on of him, the of course. Why white. Go. Of the yiu yayus est. Yayu. Danger. Her sharp sixth sense made Chu Luyue's mind ring. She retreated without hesitation. At the same time, the heavenly square cauldron in front of her started to spin. Oh no! Mao Yao is going to use his bloodline power. Seeing this scene, Shengguan Jing's heart was suddenly in his throat. Elder Bo Yen and the others also noticed that something was wrong. They immediately looked over. What does this mean? Shengguan Jing frowned and hurriedly explained. The great phoenix dragon is a primordial divine beast. His body contained an extremely powerful bloodline power. Once he mobilized it, he could easily turn the surrounding force of heaven and earth into his own control. As long as the heaven and earth force is inexhaustible, it can use it endlessly. Ordinary cultivators or magical beasts would need to guide the heaven and earth force into their bodies to become stronger, and then convert it into their own strength bit by bit. The stronger they were, the higher the efficiency of fusion and conversion, and the more they could store. That way, he would be able to display his full potential in battle. But the great phoenix dragon was a primordial divine beast. They already existed before the world was chaotic. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were born with this world. Therefore, their bloodline power was extremely heaven-defying. They could directly mobilize all the surrounding strength without any process. In the world, no matter how powerful a cultivator was, no matter how much strength they stored, how could they compare to a cheat like them? It's just that using the bloodline power like this has a huge impact on their body. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't do that. But now, Mao Yao was obviously blinded by anger at Chu Luyue. He did such a thing on impulse. Originally, everyone thought that he could directly take Chu Liuyue's life with one move. But things did not go as they wished. Not only did Chu Liyue not die, she even counterattacked slightly after taking the first two moves. Mao Yao was used to being arrogant. In his opinion, this matter had already made him lose face. That was why he had attacked so viciously without caring about anything else. He had made up his mind to kill Chu Liyue. No, I have to stop it. As Sheng Wanjing said, he raised his foot and was about to go over. However, he had only taken a few steps when he was repelled by an invisible force. This space was already controlled by Mao Yao. Outsiders could not barge in at all. Everyone was anxious, but any effort seemed especially pale and powerless at this moment. Rongxiu. Elder Wanzheng gritted his teeth and looked at Rongxiu. However, he saw him with one hand behind his back and his eyes fixed ahead. His face was cold, but he had no intention of attacking. Rongxiu? Elder Wanzheng was anxious. What time was it? Were they still going to wait and see? If this continued, it would really be too late. Boom! A bolt of heavenly lightning suddenly struck down. The elders looked around and saw that the mouth of the spring on Thousand Wine Mountain was almost completely covered in frost. Elder Bo Yen sucked in a cold breath. On one side was Chu Liyue, and on the other side was the spring. This, without waiting for him to make a choice, Mao Yao had already attacked. My bloodline shines with the sun and moon. Break! The deep dragon roar seemed to come from a distant time and space. It was like thunder, shaking people's hearts and making them unconsciously feel reverence. The force in Chu Liuyue's body suddenly started to dissipate at a terrifying speed. At the same time, a heavy pressure went straight for her dantian, as if it was going to completely crush her core of essence. Digression, sorry, my big babies, my computer is broken. I found another one at the last minute, so I'm writing much slower. I'll continue after dinner. It's about 8:00. I'm sorry, everyone. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 15:11. Chu Liyue felt as if her muscles, bones, blood, and flesh were being crushed inch by inch. An indescribable pain swept through her entire body, causing her vision to turn black. She gritted her teeth and desperately tried to mobilize the force in her body to resist this sudden and terrifying attack. However, she was in the opponent's domain and was already being suppressed. She could not even mobilize half of the force in her body. Moreover, she had already used all her strength to withstand those two moves. At this moment, the force in her body had dried up, and she could not draw out even a little bit of force to deal with the situation in front of her. Chu Liuyue's body began to tremble slightly. For a moment, she almost had no strength to hold Scarlet Heaven's sword and the Black Shield. She was only relying on her last bit of willpower to stubbornly hold on. At this moment, a purplish gold blood bead suddenly flew out from between Mao Yao's brows. That blood bead danced in front of it and quickly condensed into a strange totem. It was the great phoenix dragon's totem. The totem shone brightly, holy, and magnificent. Chu Liyue only took a glance and felt a piercing pain in her eyes. That shocking pressure seemed to be able to materialize into a real sword and was incomparably sharp. Chu Liyue turned her face away slightly and shifted her gaze. More and more wounds began to rupture on her body, and the blood that flowed out continuously dyed her clothes. Between heaven and earth, there was an empty space and silence. However, this silent and oppressive atmosphere was almost maddening. In just a short while, Chu Liyue was already covered in blood. At some point, she felt a little itchy on her face, and she forcefully wiped it with the back of her hand. It was sticky and sweet. It was blood. The back of her hand was also covered in blood. The bright red color was glaring, and it stimulated Chu Liuyue's temples to crazily throb. The force in her dantian was also constantly flowing away. Only that water bead floated silently, as if it had solidified. This can't go on, Chu Liyue thought silently in her heart. The next moment, she raised her head and looked at Mao Yao again. The distance between them was not considered close. However, Mao Yao immediately noticed Chu Liyue's gaze. It stared at Chu Liyue, expecting to see pleading and despair in his eyes. However, to its disappointment, Chu Liyue's expression was incomparably calm. She no longer wiped away the more and more bloodstains that appeared on her face, even though it made her look particularly miserable and miserable. Amidst the ghastly dense blood red, only that pair of eyes was as dark as the night that couldn't be dispelled. However, in the depths of the night, there were shining stars that shone brightly. For some reason, Mao Yao's heart suddenly skipped a beat. How could a person who was on the verge of death have such a look in his eyes? A subtle sense of impatience surged up. He had to end the battle quickly. This thought quickly flashed through its mind. The next moment, Mao Yao raised his dragon head and roared into the sky. Roar! The surrounding heaven and earth force suddenly seemed to be controlled by an invisible hand. It quickly condensed into a transparent long whip that was faintly purple-gold in color. It swung straight at Chu Liyue. Pa! The sound of air being torn apart was ear-piercing. The heavenly square cauldron was actually flung away by this whip. Chu Liyue's chest shook, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her aura rapidly weakened. There was not much force left in her body. She could only barely maintain the connection with the heavenly square cauldron. However, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to mobilize its power. Oh no! The force in her body has been exhausted, and the surrounding heaven and earth force has been completely used by Mao Yao. If this goes on, I'm afraid. Shengguan Jing's expression was tense. His heart seemed to be tightly clenched by something, and even breathing became difficult. If possible, he would rather suffer all this torture in place of Chu Liyue. However, he had just awakened his divine body and rushed all the way to Lingxiao College. His condition was not at its best. On the other hand, Mao Yao had recuperated for many years. His attack was naturally much stronger than his. Not to mention, Mao Yao had already activated his bloodline power. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens for outsiders to interfere. The onlookers in the square fell into silence at this moment. Mu Hongyu's eyes were red. Lin Qifei slowly clenched his fists. Luo Shishir looked away with a mournful expression. There were also people who subconsciously looked at Rongxiu. Chu Liyue was in a life-and-death crisis. Why hadn't he done anything yet? Rongxiu closed his eyes. Elder Wanzheng, who was standing at the side, was getting more and more anxious. However, just as he was about to speak, he suddenly saw a smear of gold appear in between Rongxiu's brows. A strange totem rapidly formed. Rongxiu's robe moved without wind. An indescribable aura suddenly spread out from his body. Elder Wanzheng was shocked and subconsciously took 2 steps back. The current Rongxiu seemed a little different. And there seemed to be great danger hidden in the unseen world. Rongxiu raised his hand. It was slender and fair with distinct knuckles. Swoosh! A cluster of golden flames suddenly appeared at his fingertips and leaped like an elf. A smear of black flashed past quickly. At this moment, the long whip had already cut through the air and hit Chu Liyue's black shield fiercely. Boom! Chu Liyue suffered a terrifying impact. The pure gold sacred armor instantly disintegrated. It transformed into countless golden fragments and flew in all directions. Her hand, which was holding the black shield tightly, instantly went numb. The next moment, her entire body was completely sent flying by this terrifying power. She fell straight down. Bam! Crack! Chu Luiyue actually fell into the almost frozen spring. The spring water overflowed and instantly swallowed her body. She disappeared in an instant. Everyone was stunned by this scene. After a moment of dead silence, dark clouds rolled in the sky, and countless Tianlei appeared in an instant. For a moment, the world shook. What's going on? Elder Bo Yen frowned and looked at the sky in bewilderment. Boom! A loud sound suddenly came from another direction. Elder Hua Feng suddenly turned his head and muttered in shock, Pengmin Mountain. Is there a riot? Digression, a 6-year-old computer is really hard to serve. I think this time, I really have to say goodbye. After that, it will probably take a long time to get used to the new keyboard and input method. It's mentally tiring. Tomorrow at 12:00 mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 15:12. At the same time, on Mount Pengmin. On the top floor of the tower, Elder Meng, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly opened his eyes. He looked at the door floating in front of him in shock. A hidden and powerful force was rapidly gathering. The faint but bright light outlined a strange pattern bit by bit. These specks of light gradually enveloped the entire door. Dong! 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 Inside the door, there seemed to be something crazily colliding. The lines broke out of the door. A vast and awe-inspiring aura instantly swept over. Elder Meng suddenly stood up. The girl is back? Who else could cause such a commotion other than that girl? He quickly turned around, ran to the window, and looked outside. What he saw immediately gave him a shock. Above the rolling mountains, the sky was dark and gloomy. Dark clouds rolled, and the wind howled. Bolts of heavenly lightning that resembled silver snakes were rapidly converging in the clouds. These Tianlei intertwined and swam, almost illuminating half the sky. That's Mount Thousand Wine? Elder Meng sucked in a breath of cold air. The strength of the barrier outside Mount Pengmin was not inferior to the barrier outside the academy. And because that door had been restless during this period, he had spent a lot of time and energy guarding it. It was also because of this that he did not notice what was happening outside. Now that he suddenly saw it, he was extremely shocked. Something happened at Mount Thousand Wine? But wasn't it fine before? Why did it suddenly, his gaze fixed, and he saw the huge purple-gold figure in the air. The great phoenix dragon. At this moment, Elder Meng's feelings could no longer be described as shock. He had only spent a little more effort on that door in the past few days. Why did so many things happen outside? Dong! The knocking on the door behind him became more and more intense. Elder Meng looked back and frowned. If that girl was really back, then opening the door should be the right thing to do. But now, he did not even see a shadow, and he was really uneasy. According to the agreement, when the girl left, she would personally return to the tower and take away what belonged to her. But now, above the floating door, in the center, a unique pattern was gradually gathering. Because they were a little far away, the commotion at Mount Pengmin did not attract the attention of the students on Qingming Square. However, Elder Hua Feng and the others were already in a state of confusion. Only a few people knew what was hidden in Mount Pengmin. She had always been fine, so why did everything happen at the same time? Elder Wanzheng's figure moved, and he was about to head straight for the spring. I'll bring her out. Just how dangerous was the mouth of the spring? If he stayed there, he was afraid. Boom! A bolt of lightning struck down from the sky. It actually struck right in front of Elder Wanzheng. Elder Wanzheng was shocked and hurriedly retreated. At the same time, he set up a barrier. The violent power of heavenly thunder spread out in all directions. Elder Wanzheng's barrier shook violently. Elder of the barrier, in the blink of an eye. Calm. Elder Wanzheng retreated again, narrowly avoiding the attack. Even so, one of his sleeves was still directly torn apart by the terrifying power. Seeing this scene, many people were inwardly shocked. Tianlei's power is so strong. Elder Wanzheng is a true high god powerhouse. Even he couldn't withstand this heavenly lightning. It's enough to show how powerful it is. I'm afraid it's different from the Tianlei we attract when we cultivate or forge yuan instruments. It's different. Didn't you notice that Tianlei's color is different from normal Tianlei? It was unknown who said this sentence, but it immediately caused everyone to raise their heads and look over. Elder Bo Yen and the others looked up. When he took a look, he was stunned on the spot. Wait! That Tianlei's color is golden? It was daytime, but dark clouds gathered, and thunder rumbled. Heaven and earth were in chaos. Above Mount Thousand Wine, there was a vortex formed by clouds. The force of heaven and earth in the surroundings was sucked into it. Tianlei appeared in the depths of the vortex. It had turned into a sea of lightning. It was a dazzling silver that made it hard to open one's eyes. If one looked carefully, one would be able to see that in the depths of the sea of lightning, a wisp of brilliant gold would occasionally flash. However, this flash of gold was too inconspicuous. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't notice it at all. The legendary golden Tianlei. Who summoned the divine tribulation? Elder Bo Yan's eyes were a little dazed. When a cultivator tried to break through, if their level was high enough, they would trigger a phenomenon in heaven and earth and summon Tianlei. The more Tianlei that was summoned, the more powerful it was. It proved that the cultivator's talent was good, and their future was limitless. However, not every breakthrough could cause such a big commotion. Generally speaking, such a situation would only happen when a cultivator was preparing to break through to rank 7 or become a high god. She's a mid-rank 9, so she naturally didn't summon the divine tribulation, Elder Hua Feng muttered in a low voice. Suddenly, his eyes widened in shock. She's going to break through to the high god realm? But from the middle stage of the 9th level to a true god-level powerhouse, there was still a gap of 2 levels. Peak rank 9 and a demigod. One had to know that when breaking through to the demigod realm, it wouldn't cause such a phenomenon. Just as he finished speaking, within the sea of lightning, several bolts of heavenly lightning struck down simultaneously. Their target was Chu Luiyue in the spring below. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 15-13. At this moment, Chu Luiyue only felt a bone-chilling cold all over her body. The cold air was so strong that for a moment, she even ignored the pain on her body. The cold spring water spread from all directions and swallowed her. She could clearly feel that every inch of her skin had been covered by the spring water. Vaguely, it was as if sharp and fine needles were crazily stabbing every part of her body. The piercing pain caused her to open her eyes. What entered her eyes was a clear blue. Was she, in the spring? Chu Luiyue thought of this and subconsciously raised her hand. A ripple of water flowed in front of her. She raised her head and looked up. The spring water was very clear, so she could clearly see the scene in the sky outside. Dark clouds were thick, and Tianlei was flickering. But, she was clearly in the spring water, so why didn't she feel uncomfortable at all? At this moment, her entire body was submerged in the water, but she felt no different from being outside. Only when the water flowed past her body would she be reminded that she was in a spring water. But soon, Chu Luiyue understood why. It was because the water in the spring was not real spring water. It was liquid condensed from incomparably pure energy. Chu Luiyue was a little shocked. In the past, she had been to Thousand Wine Mountain many times, and it was not that she had never come into close contact with it. But she had never realized that there was such a secret hidden inside. When she was outside, she did not see anything unusual, and the water flowing down seemed to be real water. Only when she was here did she realize that there was actually another mystery in the spring. Chu Luyue looked down and was suddenly stunned. The spring was very shallow. From here, she could see the bottom directly. Around her were piles of mountain rocks, and their shapes were irregular and rugged. Upon closer inspection, there were many marks on them that seemed to have been left by some sharp weapon. Was it, because of those Tianlei? Just as this thought flashed through Chu Luyue's mind, a flash of silver lightning flashed past her eyes. The lightning bolt was very short and small, no bigger than the size of a palm. From Chu Luyue's point of view, it looked like a silver fish swimming by quickly. The Tianlei quickly disappeared from the stone wall, leaving behind a shallow mark. Chu Luyue's eyebrows twitched slightly. He stretched out his hand and gently brushed it across the uneven stone wall. There were so many marks. Just how much Tianlei's power had they endured? Soon, a second and a third appeared. The Tianlei seemed to have toned down a lot in the mouth of the spring and was no longer as aggressive. And for some reason, it was as if they had grown eyes. When they passed by Chu Luyue, they would deliberately avoid him. Chu Luyue didn't notice it at first. It was only when she unintentionally stretched out her hand that the Tianlei suddenly took a detour. That was when she realized that something was wrong. Previously, Dumpling had devoured the Tianlei's power in this place and completed her bloodline awakening. Chu Luyue surveyed her surroundings and realized that the number of lightning bolts here was indeed much less than when she came here in the past. However, the rock at the bottom was very flat. Chu Luyue stared at it and vaguely felt that something was amiss. Logically speaking, there was no reason for the Tianlei to deliberately avoid the rock at the bottom. Why was that rock the only one that was different? However, this thought only flashed through her mind and was quickly ignored by her. That was because she realized that the wounds on her body were rapidly healing. Immersed in this gentle and generous energy, her originally battered and exhausted body, which was riddled with scars, was rapidly recovering. Her injuries were also recovering at an astonishing speed. In a short while, Chu Luyue saw that the fine wounds on her arms had all scabbed over and turned a light pink. There was also a portion of energy that had entered her body and was slowly nourishing her limbs and bones. Chu Luyue's aura was gradually recovering. A faint ripple came from her dantian. Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. It was the Black Pyramid. At this moment, the water around her suddenly surged violently. She seemed to have sensed something and looked up. Several bolts of heavenly lightning were flying down from the sky, directly striking down at her. Why is she suddenly breaking through to the God realm? Seeing this, Elder Bo Yen finally couldn't help but exclaim. Not to mention that trying to break through to the God realm from the middle stage of rank 9 was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Even if Sheng Wanyu really had the ability to do so, with her current physical condition, she was probably doomed. She had just taken 3 of Mao Yao's attacks, and her force was almost depleted. She was covered in injuries. In the blink of an eye, she had to face this sudden God tribulation. If it were him, he wouldn't be able to bear it either. He couldn't help but look at Elder Wanzheng. Wanzheng, she's your disciple. Why didn't you know about this before? Elder Wanzheng's expression was also complicated. He was also very worried. After all, that was his most beloved disciple. He had yet to recover from the shock of his disciple being a girl, and in the blink of an eye, he encountered such a thing again. Who could he find to reason with? How could I know about this in advance? Elder Wanzheng gritted his teeth and shouted. She usually only followed me to cultivate as a celestial physician. Who knew that she, enough. Stop quarreling. Elder Huafeng almost cursed out loud. What time is it now? The most important thing is to think about how to save that girl's life. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone quieted down. Of course, they didn't want anything to happen to her. even if they were basically sure that the sudden eruption of the spring was indeed related to her. But that was another matter. Ever since this child entered the academy, she had been valued and liked by them. Even if she had caused a lot of trouble, they really didn't have the heart to punish her ruthlessly. Of course, the main reason was that those punishments didn't seem to be effective on her. Now, even if they wanted to punish her, they had to wait for her to come back safely. How do we save her? Shengguan Jing stood alone at the side. There was no expression on his face. Only his eyes were fixed on the spring. Previously, it was Mao Yao who used the power of his bloodline. Now, it was Yu Er who summoned the god Tribulation. In these two situations, outsiders couldn't interfere. Even taking a step closer was as difficult as ascending to the sky. If it was Tianlei who was summoned during the refinement of the Yuan instrument, he might be able to step forward and help her block a little. But this was the god Tribulation that was summoned when a cultivator broke through to the god realm. No one could help her. Whether she lived or died, it was all up to her. Shengguan Jing clenched his fists tightly and slowly exhaled. You must be well, boom. The first bolt of lightning had already descended from the sky and accurately struck the mouth of the spring. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 15-14. You overestimate yourself. Mao Yao could not help but sneer in the air. Some were shocked, and some were surprised. It did not hesitate to use the power of its bloodline to kill Shengguan Yu. However, it did not expect her to summon the divine tribulation as soon as it made its move. Mao Yao's eyes flashed coldly as he looked at the terrifying commotion in the sky. No matter how powerful it was, it still had to crawl under the sky. Now that it could not resist the divine tribulation, it could only watch from the side. Even the heaven and earth origin force that was originally under its control had already broken free from its restraints and gathered towards the heavenly lightning. However, it did not matter. The terrifying power of the divine tribulation could only be stronger than it. Shengguan Yu was just an arrow at the end of its flight. It could not even survive the first Tianlei, let alone the golden divine tribulation. Mao Yao was in a good mood when he thought of this. After admiring the expressions of Shengguan Jing and the others for a while, he began to wait leisurely. Although it had only calculated half of the third move, as long as the result was what it wanted, nothing else mattered. The only thing that made it feel strange was Rongxiu. Since a while ago, the others had been worried about Shengguan Yu. Shengguan Jing and the others could not wait to bear it for her. Only Rongxiu remained standing in the same spot. At this moment, his eyes were still closed. The golden flame burning on his fingertip was still dancing and shining brightly. It seemed to be no different from before. The faint glow shone on Rongxiu's face, making it half bright and half dark. His handsome and devilish face was completely calm. Mao Yao watched for a while. He could not figure it out, so he looked away. Rongxiu floated quietly in the air as if he was frozen. A gust of wind rose and swept up his clothes, making them flutter loudly. A black light was faintly discernible in the flame on his fingertip. Boom! The first Tianlei, wrapped in a shocking aura, struck the mouth of the spring. Spring water splashed everywhere. Between heaven and earth, there was a sudden silence. Almost everyone's eyes were focused on this place. On the Qingming Square, all sorts of discussions gradually sounded. Heavens! If this Tianlei falls, even if he doesn't die, he'll be crippled, right? She was already on the verge of death after suffering such serious injuries. How could she have withstood this attack? I don't think so either. What a pity, she's so talented. He had even contracted 2 divine beasts. If not for today's accident, his future would be limitless. Sigh. But why did she suddenly summon the divine tribulation? Could it be that he wanted to take a gamble? After all, if she can break through to the divine level, she might be able to completely receive Mao Yao's third move. She's only at the middle stage of the 9th stage. If he was at the peak of the 9th stage, it would be understandable. But how could he make such a huge leap and become a high god? Even a 3-year-old knows that this is absolutely impossible. But it's useless even at the peak of the 9th step. The great phoenix dragon used the power of its bloodline and controlled the origin power of heaven and earth. Unless you can break through and become a true divine-level expert, all your efforts will be futile. Maybe he was really forced into a corner. Everyone had different opinions, but they all had the same understanding of the outcome. Sheng Guanyu was really finished this time. Tianlei fell into the spring. After the turbulent impact, it gradually calmed down. Looking at the calm surface of the water, Elder Bo Yen and the others looked at each other. Where was she? Regardless of whether she was injured or, why was there no reaction at all? At first glance, it was as if the Tianlei had been swallowed by the spring. Elder Wanzheng hurriedly took out his jade pendant and glanced at it. Back then, he had asked Chu Luyue to leave a trace of her aura in this jade pendant. It was supposed to be convenient for them to contact each other, but now it was the only way he could confirm whether she was alive or not. Sensing that the trace of her aura was still there, Elder Wanzheng suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and continued to wait. But this idle time did not last long. This was because the second bolt of heavenly lightning was about to strike. After that, it was the third. The fourth. Until, several of them struck at the same time. When one looked at it from afar, it practically caused one to wonder exactly how such a tiny spring was able to receive so many bolts of heavenly lightning and still not collapse. Marks were left on the rocks at the edge of the spring, but it did not collapse. On the contrary, the surrounding ground seemed to be unable to withstand the concentrated bombardment of this terrifying power, and cracks appeared on it. It was like a spider web, and it was a ghastly sight. Sheng Guanjing's heart ached. At a certain moment, he could not hold it in any more and looked up. The sea of lightning in the sky was still dazzling, and the number of Tianlei did not seem to decrease at all. They had fallen behind by so much earlier. Sheng Guanjing could faintly smell the rusty stench between his lips and teeth. If it were any other time, Chu Luyue was a normal demigod trying to break through to the high god level and summoning such a shocking god tribulation, he would be wild with joy. Because this meant that she had unlimited potential on the path of cultivation. Especially when it was a golden god tribulation. He had roamed the world for many years, but he had only heard of its existence in rumors. Those who could summon a golden god tribulation were all top geniuses in the world. But now, she was only a middle stage rank 9. With the passage of time, the noisy discussions gradually disappeared. Countless bolts of heavenly lightning fell, but there was no movement at all in the spring. What this meant was self-evident. Mao Yao snickered. Sheng Guanjing, it seems that today, you're going to send your young, plop. Before he could finish his sentence, a figure suddenly dashed out of the spring. Digression, 6 p.m. mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 15:15. The figure was slim and slender. Her tattered clothes fluttered in the wind, wrapping around her exquisite body. Her silky hair danced in the wind like a butterfly. Most of the sky was covered by dark clouds, and it was dark and gloomy. Everything below seemed to be shrouded in a gray gauze. Only the vague silhouette could be seen, but the true appearance could not be seen clearly. However, when she flew upwards, she was facing the resplendent sea of lightning. The light shone on her face and body. It was so dazzling that she seemed to be glowing. Her clothes were tattered and stained with blood. However, it could not hide the unparalleled nobility that came from her bones and blood. Her black eyes were firm, persistent, and disdainful. From afar, she seemed to be more dazzling than everything around her. She held a shield in one hand and scarlet cloud sword in the other. She looked like a god of war who had just emerged from a sea of blood. She moved against the light and rushed straight towards the direction where the heavenly lightning was striking. Is that Shang Wanyu? She's still alive. No. Shouldn't the point be that she's not only alive, but her combat power is also much stronger than before? Everyone was shocked when Chu Liuyue's figure appeared. Everyone was talking about it. They were shocked, confused, and excited. They had different emotions and reactions. Previously, they had seen clearly how Mao Yao had knocked Shang Wanyu down with a single move and she had fallen into the Thousand Wine Mountain Spring. After that, they saw with their own eyes how Tianlei gathered and sent them into the spring. Logically speaking, Shang Wanyu shouldn't have been able to hold on any longer. How did she manage to rush out in the blink of an eye? Moreover, she returned to everyone's sight in such a domineering manner. That speed is definitely not something an intermediate 9th stage cultivator can achieve. Elder Wanzheng's heart was beating so fast that it almost jumped out of his chest. He knew that Chu Luyue was still alive, so he had been hoping that she would come out. However, when he truly saw this scene, he was still deeply shocked. He had originally thought that the best-case scenario would be for Chu Luyue to be able to survive under the encirclement of these terrifying forces. She might be seriously injured, and her cultivation might even regress. But as long as he was alive, nothing else mattered. After all, this was a deity's tribulation. But Elder Wanzheng really did not expect that Chu Luyue could actually reappear in such a manner. She seems to have broken through to the peak of the 9th stage. Elder Wanzheng did his best to suppress the excitement in his heart. However, his red face and clenched fists showed that his emotions were not as calm as he appeared. Peak of the 9th stage? How is this possible? When Elder Bo Yen heard this, his first reaction was disbelief. Previously, that girl had clearly been seriously injured and had fallen down. How could she have broken through in such a short time? Because they were still quite a distance away from Chu Luyue, and she had been wearing a yuan item that concealed her aura, they weren't too sure whether she had broken through or not. But that speed, it seemed that it was indeed much faster than before. She swallowed the power in the spring. Elder Huafeng glanced down. At this moment, the clear spring was completely clear. A layer of frost was also condensing at an astonishing speed. From the looks of it, it was clear that the remaining power had been taken by Chu Luyue. The corner of Elder Bo Yan's eyes twitched violently, and then he took a deep breath. Calm down. You must calm down. Things were not so bad that they could not be salvaged. After all, many Tianlei had fallen into the spring just now. They should be able to hold on for a while. The most important thing now was to protect that girl's life. Boom boom boom. Chu Luyue directly collided with the Tianlei. Her figure was instantly covered by the dazzling light. Almost no one saw that when the Tianlei had landed, Chu Luyue had put away the black shield and scarlet heaven sword in front of her. She knew that this was a divine tribulation that she had summoned, so she had to face it herself. It was meaningless to use any external force to resist. The silver snake-like Tianlei landed on her body, as if it wanted to tear her skin and flesh apart. The surging power crushed every inch of her body. The wounds on her body that had just healed burst open again. But at the same time, the water droplet in her body began to spin slowly. Waves of power surged out from it and poured into her limbs and bones. The two forces used Chu Luyue's body as a battlefield and began an intense battle. Chu Luyue was almost numb from the pain. However, the more it was so, the stronger the fighting spirit in her heart. Blood kept flowing out from the corner of her mouth. However, during this process, the Tianlei swam away from her body, and a large portion of its power was devoured by her. Chu Luyue's body seemed to have become a bottomless pit. Even she did not realize that she was crazily absorbing all the energy around her. The energy flowed into her dantian through her yuan meridian, and through the water droplet, it was quickly converted into her own energy. Her aura began to rise at an even more shocking speed. Sensing this strange movement, Mao Yao finally could not sit still any longer. It looked at the sky in disbelief, almost thinking that it had sensed wrongly. Under the attack of so many Tianlei, Sheng Guanyu's aura actually increased instead of decreasing. How did she do it? The faint uneasiness in its heart surged again, making it anxious. But now that a divine tribulation had descended from the heavens, even it could not be impudent. It could only wait there obediently. It quickly glanced to the side and realized that Sheng Guanjing and the others seemed to be in a daze and shock as well. It seemed that they did not know either, but if it wasn't for the help of these people, how could a mere Sheng Guanyu have such confidence and means? One had to know that under such circumstances, even a venerable divine artifact would not be of much use. Because the divine tribulation was targeted at her. After an unknown period of time, the Tianlei in the sky were almost depleted, and gradually dimmed. Only then could the crowd see Chu Liuyue's figure clearly again. She was suspended in the air, her clothes fluttering in the wind. She was the only bright pearl between heaven and earth. She was clearly in a sorry state, but at this moment, she stood there with her back straight, as proud as a pine tree. Silence reigned. Everyone was dumbfounded. She actually endured so many heavenly lightning bolts. Elder Bo Yen muttered in a low voice, "There's still the last divine tribulation. There's still the last divine tribulation. Only by enduring this will I be considered to have truly succeeded." The crowd subconsciously held their breaths. Mao Yao gritted his teeth and sneered. Without a divine territory, she would not be able to endure this golden divine tribulation. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 15-16. The wind howled, and the cold air was biting cold. Chu Luyue raised her hand and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. It was dark red. In fact, at this moment, her entire body was covered in blood. No matter how she wiped it, she couldn't wipe it clean. But she didn't care. She took a deep breath and waited for the bone-piercing pain on her body to gradually numb before looking up. Dark clouds covered the city. The sky was gloomy, as if someone had splashed ink into the sky and dyed it bit by bit. It was so oppressive that it was almost suffocating. And among them, there was only a brilliant golden light left. It was especially eye-catching. It was a Tianlei, and it was also her divine tribulation. Its size and shape were no different from the Tianlei that Chu Luyue had seen before. However, the color was golden, and the pressure and aura were the strongest she had ever seen in her life. There was no other. Chu Luyue stared at the golden divine tribulation and narrowed her eyes. In fact, like everyone else, she didn't know how this divine tribulation appeared. The only thing she knew was that she had fallen into the mouth of the spring, and then the strange phenomena of heaven and earth, the divine tribulation, had appeared. At that time, she was covered in wounds, and the only thought in her mind was to survive. How could she have the time to prepare for a breakthrough? Not to mention summoning a divine tribulation. Only when a cultivator tried to break through to the high god realm would they attract a divine tribulation. She knew this very well. It wasn't like she didn't know her own strength, so how could she cause such trouble for herself? But this divine tribulation still appeared. There was only one possibility. Chu Luyue tilted her head. Noticing her actions, everyone was at a loss. "What is that girl looking at?" Elder Bo Yen asked nervously. Elder Huafeng followed her gaze and muttered uncertainly, "What's the matter?" It seems to be the Donghuang Bell Tower." She was facing a life and death crisis, so why was she looking at the Donghuang Bell Tower? No one knew. Soon, Chu Luyue retracted her gaze. In the next moment, she suddenly closed her eyes. Seeing Chu Luyue do this, many people looked at each other. Wasn't she full of energy just now? Besides, she had already survived Tianlei, hadn't she? Now, only the last golden divine tribulation was left in the sky. Why did she suddenly stop moving? Don't tell me, he's giving up. In the divine ruins world, in the past 10,000 years, the number of cultivators who could summon a golden divine tribulation can be counted on one hand. I'm afraid that this girl's innate talent is even above our expectations. But she's not even a demigod yet. How is she going to cross this hurdle? Until now, Elder Bo Yen still couldn't figure out how this divine tribulation had appeared. Elder Huafeng had a headache. In the end, he could only sigh. Everything is her own good fortune. Whether it's a blessing or a curse, it all depends on her. Elder Wanzheng remained silent. He stared at Chu Luyue for a while with a complicated look in his eyes. He didn't know if it was because of the bloodstains on his face, but when he looked at Chu Luyue, he found that Chu Luyue's face was even more similar to the one in his memory. The wretched wounds and bloodstains wiped away the last trace of immaturity on her face. Instead, it added an indescribable fierceness and sharpness. And that pair of eyes was even more. Elder Wanzheng couldn't help but look back. His fists loosened and tightened as his heart surged. From Chu Liyue's point of view, she looked over there. The first thing she saw was the Donghuang Bell Tower. And the second thing she saw was the distant Pengmin Mountain. What did she see just now? Chu Liyue closed her eyes, and her vision fell into darkness. However, when she spread out her divine sense, she could still clearly see everything around her. Cracked mountain rocks, frosted springs, toppled trees, this was the Thousand Wine Mountain. A little further away, there were continuous undulating mountain peaks, towering and tall. There was also the vast Qingming Square, and the Donghuang Bell Tower that had stood for 10,000 years. When she saw the Donghuang Bell Tower, that familiar feeling surged in her heart again. And this time, it was even stronger than before. Even though there was such a long distance between them, in her consciousness, the Donghuang Bell Tower seemed to be within reach. No. What she wanted was not the Donghuang Bell Tower. Chu Liyue shook her head slightly. It was as if there was something guiding her to move forward. She blocked out all the noise around her. She only let her divine sense run in a certain direction willfully and casually. Pengmin Mountain. Pengmin Mountain. At a certain moment, Chu Liyue heard a crisp sound in her ears, as if something had shattered. In the next moment, she suddenly realized, this sound came from her dantian. It was the black pyramid that had shattered. With this sound, the black seal quickly disintegrated. Rays of bright light burst out from it. In an instant it was as if the dam had collapsed, and the river flowed down. Countless images and sounds rushed into Chu Liyue's mind. At this moment, the blood in her body seemed to be boiling. Her heart was beating violently, again and again. Her temples were throbbing, and there was a faint stabbing pain in her mind. It was the pain caused by suddenly receiving too much information. At this moment, the golden divine tribulation finally fell with a loud bang. In an instant, the golden light shone. Heaven and earth were silent. It was as if a shocking pressure had come from ancient time and space with wind and frost. The expressions of Elder Bo Yen and the others changed. Retreat. Even if it was them, they might not be able to endure this kind of pressure. Even Mao Yao was shocked and immediately retreated. A faint golden light spread out from the sky. Everywhere it passed, the void collapsed. The elders and Sheng Wanjing, who were waiting in midair, were the first to bear the brunt of it. Although they had retreated at full speed, they were still affected by this force and were sent flying. The several elders who were standing guard below were also taken aback. They hurriedly shouted, "Don't worry. Activate the array of the square." However, before they could do anything, the force had already covered the sky and earth. The expressions of everyone on the square changed. Some of the weaker ones had already spat out blood. Several elders struggled to activate the array of the square. A silver barrier quickly appeared and protected everyone within. Some of the stronger students also joined in to help. Only then did they manage to prop up the formation. Countless people looked up at the sky in horror. They were so far away, but they were still affected. Then, what about Shengguanyu? That golden divine tribulation was heading straight for her. When the golden wave was about to touch Chu Luyue, she suddenly opened her eyes. Her eyes were dark and indifferent. It was like a glacier that would not melt for 1,000 years, but also like the eternal night. No matter how strong the wind and frost were, she remained unmoved. A bright golden light was reflected in her eyes. In the next moment, Chu Luyue raised her hand and clenched the air. Divine realm, return. A low chant echoed in this world, as if a saint was ruling. As if inspired, wind and thunder swept across Pengmin Mountain. In an instant, the door on the top floor opened. Digression, alright, the answer to the reward question that was asked a while ago is out. The reward will be given out later in the second month. Finally, I want to ask for a review vote and touch it again. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 15-17. A torrent of silver and crimson suddenly surged out from Pengmin Mountain. It was the most extreme color, as if it had gathered the most dazzling and sacred radiance in the world, and also as if it had refined the purest blood in the world. The silver was cold, and the crimson was boiling. They were clearly different, but at this moment, there was an indescribable closeness and compatibility. It was as if they were born this way. The torrent seemed to flow down from a distant mountain, and in an instant, it seemed to be able to travel 1,000 miles. It drew a perfect arc in the air, and with wind and thunder, it went straight for Chu Luyue. Elder Meng stood on the top floor of the tower, one hand holding the wooden frame of the window tightly. His whole body was tense, and he was dumbfounded. In the room, the door that had been tightly shut was now wide open. The flowing light that had been gradually gathering on the door had now been swept away by that shocking aura. Elder Meng stood there, and saw the light on the door gradually dim. The strange totem on it also began to dissipate at a speed visible to the naked eye. The originally bumpy lines were gradually worn down. The door slowly returned to its original appearance. From the looks of it, it was no different from the 6 doors on the first floor. This door hid a secret, and now that the secret was gone, there was nothing special about it. Elder Meng stared at the door for a while, then suddenly turned around and looked out the window. Elder Meng's heart seemed to stop beating for a moment when he saw the intertwined silver and crimson light that filled the sky like a surging river rushing towards the young woman who was hovering in midair. Shengguanyu, Shengguanyu. He seemed to have suddenly thought of something, and a deep shock flashed in his old eyes. Could it be? There was no surprise. The torrent of flowing light that streaked across the sky and silently tore the space apart swept over everyone's heads, shuttled through the mountains, and swept past the Donghuang Bell Tower. Wind and waves. Vast and mighty. The scene seemed to have frozen. All sound seemed to have dissipated at this moment. Between heaven and earth, there was only silence. The dark clouds stopped moving, and the wind stopped howling. Even those people were standing there in a daze, as if they had been drawn into a painting. It was an indescribable pressure and aura. There was no need for words. As soon as it appeared, it seized the minds of others and caused them to feel reverence and submission. Almost everyone's gaze seemed to be glued to it, moving along with it. Then, they saw that the extremely shocking torrent that contained a vast aura instantly withdrew all of its sharpness and threat when it arrived before Chu Luyue. Looking from afar, it was originally a river flowing through the sky. Finally, it stopped in front of Chu Luyue. Like tired birds returning to their nests, they carried deep longing and attachment. Chu Luiyue looked at the bright flowing light that was intertwined with silver and red in front of him. His calm and indifferent eyes finally showed a trace of emotion. This aura, he had not felt it for a long time. Her fingertips trembled slightly as she probed forward. It was just a light tap. Crash. The sound of flowing water could be heard. The thousands of flowing lights instantly transformed into colorful lines that surrounded Chu Luiyue's body. These lines intertwined and overlapped with each other. At first glance, it looked disorderly, but in fact, it contained some kind of strange rhythm. Chu Luiyue could not help but curl her red lips into a smile. No wonder when she entered the tower, she would always choose the same door among the 7 doors. Moreover, after entering, she would quickly immerse herself in it, and the speed of her cultivation would greatly increase. Because, that was her god domain. Any cultivator would feel the most comfortable and free in their own god domain. In the world, where else could make her feel so at ease and comfortable? Even without thinking about cultivation, the gentle and generous power would automatically flow into her body. It would nourish her bloodline, strengthen her body, and increase her strength. Only the god domain. Chu Luiyue raised her hand. A few flowing lights circled around her palm, lively and affectionate. Chu Luiyue exhaled softly. In just a short while, the injuries on her body had already begun to recover at an astonishing speed. In her god domain, she was the ruler. In the next moment, Chu Luiyue looked up. The golden divine tribulation was about to descend. That's a god domain. Elder Huafeng's expression was blank as he looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief. The reason why he was so shocked was not that Mount Pengmin had actually suppressed a god domain, but he had seen this god domain before. No, to be precise, he was too familiar with it. In fact, how many elders in Lingxiao College were not familiar with this god domain? Elder Huafeng stared fixedly at the slender figure surrounded by the god domain, and his heart was already in turmoil. Shengguanyu had actually summoned this god domain. What did this mean? She really is, Elder Bo Yen finally spoke, but it was rare for him to stutter. After a long time, he still couldn't say that name. To be able to make Elder Bo Yen, who was used to seeing storms and waves, have such a reaction, it had to be said that she was quite amazing. He looked at Chu Luiyue as if he wanted to see more from her face. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and pulled Elder Huafeng beside him. Huafeng, she. Is it her? There was even a slight tremble at the end of his voice. Elder Huafeng was simply extremely annoyed. It was already so obvious. Who couldn't tell? Who else could it be if it wasn't her? Elder Bo Yen seemed to realize that his actions were a little inappropriate and coughed twice to cover it up. Don't misunderstand. I was just thinking that you know that girl better and have more experience, so you will definitely be more certain. Elder Huafeng's face darkened. What experience? The experience of being cheated. Have you ever considered my feelings when you praise me with such a sincere tone? It was obvious that Elder Bo Yen really didn't care about this. Elder Huafeng originally wanted to refute, but after racking his brains for a while, he realized in despair that he really couldn't refute. He rubbed his face fiercely, regained his rationality, and looked over again. But this time, as he looked at her, a smile couldn't help but appear on his face. These eyes, this temper, were indeed exactly the same as before. Especially that ability to cause trouble, that arrogant personality, I should have known. How many people in the world could be like her? She was truly unique and unparalleled in the world. Chu Luiyue clenched her fingers. The resplendent torrent that filled the sky quickly condensed. In the blink of an eye, a silver and crimson ball was formed in her palm. She suddenly glanced sideways at Mao Yao. Senior Mao Yao. Mao Yao was shocked and looked at her absent-mindedly. The woman suddenly smiled brightly. You will soon know whether I can withstand this divine tribulation or not. As soon as she finished speaking, she took half a step back and flicked her finger. Countless starlight scattered in an instant. It blotted out the sky and covered the sun. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 15:18. Those silver-red dots of light swayed gently and soundlessly covered half of the sky. It was like a sea of stars that completely surrounded Chu Luyue. She stood upright in mid-air, her hair fluttering in the wind. Her eyes were filled with magnanimity and pride. She raised her head and looked at the golden god Tribulation. That golden light had already descended. In an instant, it charged into the silver-red sea of stars. The power of both sides collided and started to fight fiercely. It was silent, so silent that it made one feel even more oppressed. It was like a golden machete that was trying to split open the sea. The golden machete was extremely sharp and had a heavy aura. However, the sea water was vast, and as the waves surged, it silently swallowed the sharp aura and annihilated it. Gradually, the golden machete sank to the bottom of the sea and was polished into specks of golden light. Those specks of light unconsciously surged toward Chu Liyue's body. The moment they landed on her body, they immediately disappeared. The rich and majestic power seeped into Chu Liyue's body bit by bit. Her muscles, bones, blood, and flesh began to undergo huge changes under the refinement of this pure power. And the aura on her body began to rise at a terrifying speed. Just now, in the spring of the Thousand Wine Mountain, she had borrowed the power contained there to break through to the peak of the 9th stage. Now that the God realm had descended, what she needed to do was to devour the power of the God Tribulation and completely raise her strength to that of a high god. This golden divine tribulation was not her tribulation. Instead, it was a stepping stone for her to ascend. When he saw that the golden god tribulation was gradually disintegrated and annihilated, Mao Yao's heart suddenly sank. He had originally hoped that this golden god tribulation could directly kill Sheng Guanyu. After all, with her body of flesh and blood, it was impossible for her to withstand that kind of power. But he did not expect that she actually had a god realm. And this god realm was extremely powerful. Everywhere it passed, it was like breaking dry weeds. Even the force of heaven and earth around the golden god tribulation was occupied. One had to know that even he could not do this. Countless thoughts flashed through Mao Yao's mind, and it was a mess. Didn't they say that Sheng Guanyu was only a 9th stage warrior? Where did this deity domain come from? In this world, only a true high god could possess a complete deity domain. If the divine realm was hers, didn't that mean she was a high deity? But when they were fighting just now, Sheng Guanyu's strength seemed to be only at the 9th rank. And at this time, she was clearly preparing to break through. There was no need to hide such things. She had no reason to. Mao Yao's eyes were cold, but his heart was not as calm as it appeared on the surface. It finally knew where the uneasiness came from. As an ordinary stage 9 warrior, Sheng Guanyu had too many treasures and abilities that she shouldn't have. How could there be such a thing in the world? First reach the divine realm, then try to break through to the high deity level. Mao Yao could not help but turn around to take a look. Suddenly, he saw a figure rushing over rapidly. It immediately became vigilant. The person who came was extremely strong. However, Elder Meng, who had rushed over after reinforcing the boundary of Mount Pengmin, had no time to care about Mao Yao at this time. Elder Meng, why are you here? Sensing the commotion, Elder Bo Yen and the others finally retracted their gazes. Elder Meng waved his hand and stared straight at Chu Luyue. I'm here to see you, The few of them looked at each other. Elder Meng's words confirmed their previous conjecture. Although they had thought of this, they were still a little moved when they heard Elder Meng's incomparably firm tone. Elder Meng, then, Elder Huafeng lowered his voice and signaled in Mao Yao's direction. There was still a troublesome person over there. If it was an ordinary person, it would be fine, but the other party had a noble status, so they could not make things too stiff. Only then did old Meng cast a sidelong glance at Mao Yao. Soon after, he laughed. This is Er's opponent. Naturally, we'll leave it to her to deal with. In other words, there was no need to trouble them to deal with it. Meng Xian. Mao Yao suddenly raised his voice with an angry expression. Elder Meng was leisurely and did not care at all. In fact, 1,000 years ago, he had also interacted with Mao Yao. Both parties had an average impression of each other, but because of their status, they had always been indifferent. But now, Elder Meng was still that Elder Meng, but Mao Yao had been reduced to fighting with a teenage student of Lingxiao College. Of course, Elder Meng looked down on him. Although this student was a little unusual, he was still able to control himself. Thinking of this, Elder Meng chuckled and stroked his beard. In the past few years, in order to guard this god realm, he did not dare to take half a step out of Mount Pengmin. Now, that girl had finally returned. Elder Meng shook his head as he watched. He was really careless. There were so many hints earlier, but he did not notice it at all. Other than herself, who else could enter her god realm? Between heaven and earth, there was silence. Almost everyone thought that when this golden god tribulation descended, it would clash with Chu Liuyue's god realm. It would definitely be a huge commotion. But the reality was different from what they expected. The two forces entangled with each other and fought silently. The scene seemed to be delayed. Every minute change was easily captured by the crowd. They could see that the golden god tribulation began to disintegrate bit by bit. They could also see that the silver-red sea of stars was swept by the wind and clouds. They could also see those stars hovering around Chu Liyue, filling her strength bit by bit. Crack! At a certain moment, Chu Liyue clearly heard a crisp sound coming from within her body. A demigod. At this moment, the god realm seemed to have sensed the change in her aura, and began to surge violently. The wave surged and completely swallowed the golden god tribulation. Chu Liyue slowly closed her eyes. Her body shone with light. Even in this brilliant sea of stars, it was still so bright and dazzling. That was the power of the god tribulation, and it was continuously flowing into her body. Her body was being torn apart all over, but it was healing at an even faster speed. In this repeated process, her body was rapidly transforming. And her aura was still rising. Mao Yao was finally starting to panic. If Shang Guanyu really succeeded in breaking through to the great god level, then he would definitely lose the bet today. At that time, he would be utterly humiliated. How could he go back and face his clansmen? Not only did he fail to bring the corpse back, but he even lost to a teenage girl. But now, this teenage girl was trying to break through to the great god level. Mao Yao gritted his teeth and suddenly moved toward Chu Liyue. He had to stop her. Sensing his movements, Elder Meng and the others' expressions changed. Mao Yao. How dare you? That girl was at the critical moment of her breakthrough. If she was disturbed, they were afraid that, smack. The purplish-gold dragon tail swung violently. The violent power instantly transformed into a sharp icicle and went straight for Chu Liyue's back. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 15-19. Mao Yao's sudden attack was beyond everyone's expectations. They did not expect him to be so shameless that he would resort to unscrupulous means to achieve his goal. Elder Meng's face darkened and he was about to step forward. Mao Yao. However, Mao Yao suddenly sneered. Meng Xian, if you interfere, Shang Guanyu will automatically admit defeat. They had made it clear that Shang Guanyu would have to take on the 3 moves. In fact, he had only used half of the third move. Now that he wanted to attack, the others would not object. "You," Elder Meng choked. He was so angry that his face turned pale. However, there was still a moment of hesitation in the movements of his hands. He did not want Mao Yao to interfere with Yu Er's plan. However, he knew how much effort she had put in to win this battle. If he intervened now, all the torture she had gone through would be in vain. "Elder Meng." A clear and calm voice suddenly came from behind him. Elder Meng turned around. He saw that Chu Luyue had opened her eyes. Her eyes were dark and calm. They seemed to encompass everything in the world. They were vast and deep, yet calm. Elder Meng's chaotic heart seemed to be comforted by something. "This is between me and Elder Mao Yao. Leave it to me." The corners of Chu Luyue's lips curled up as she spoke. Even the corners of her eyes were smiling. Elder Meng wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, he nodded. All right. Since she had said so, it meant that she had her own plans. He took a step back and retreated. Chu Liyue's gaze shifted slightly. The icicle was already in front of her. She looked calm and composed, as if she did not sense the danger at all. Or perhaps, in her eyes, this attack was not worth mentioning at all. Chu Liyue suddenly raised her hand. The silver-red sea of stars in the sky surged. The next moment, the spots of light in front of her started to condense rapidly. The spots of light became so dense that even the air seemed to become viscous. As soon as the icicle approached, it began to slow down at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it was as if he had fallen into a swamp, and he came to a standstill. At this moment, it was only a few steps away from Chu Liyue. However, this small distance seemed to have become a natural moat that it could not cross no matter what. Mao Yao's eyes flashed with shock. How, previously, it had vaguely guessed that Shengguan Yu's god realm was not to be underestimated. It might even be stronger than its own god realm. However, it didn't expect to be completely crushed. When the two deity domains collided, it was actually the one that was at a disadvantage. That icicle, which had condensed its abundant power, was actually unable to break into the opponent's divine domain. Mao Yao was embarrassed to the extreme, gnashing his teeth in hatred. At this moment, Chu Liyue's gaze swept past the icicle and lightly swept over Mao Yao. Mao Yao had never thought that he would be casually sized up by someone with such a casual gaze. Senior Mao Yao. Chu Liyue suddenly opened his mouth. He spoke very sincerely and sincerely. You've delayed my breakthrough. A soft wind brushed past her body and rolled up the corner of her clothes. She raised her head slightly. Her originally white and beautiful face was now stained with blood. However, there was a smile at the corner of her lips. It was like a fresh flower bud quietly blooming in the chilly spring morning. For some reason, Mao Yao's heart suddenly thumped. Its strength was clearly much stronger than the opponent's. Even if Shengguan Yu succeeded in breaking through to the high god level, he would still be no match for it. At the very least, one had to be a venerable god to fight it. However, at this moment, when it saw the faint smile on Chu Liyue's face, it suddenly felt a chill sweep over its entire body. It was so cold that it reached its bones. Chu Liyue's fingertips moved gently. The remaining half of the golden god tribulation suddenly fell into her hands. Chu Liyue grabbed it tightly. I hate this kind of thing the most. She tilted her head and said word by word. Every word seemed to have been quenched in ice water. It was bone-chilling. Alarm bells rang in Mao Yao's mind. What are you trying to do? I don't want to do anything. You, on the other hand, have always wanted to end all of this as soon as possible? Chu Liyue slowly held the golden god tribulation tightly with her slender and fair fingers. Sparks could be vaguely seen at the edge of the golden god tribulation. Everyone trembled in fear and was dumbfounded. Crazy. Shengguanyu actually held the Golden God Tribulation in his hands. Did he care about the Golden God Tribulation at all? Chu Luyue suddenly raised her eyebrows and shouted. Then I'll fulfill your wish. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Luyue exerted force in his hands. Bang! That half of the Golden Divine Tribulation instantly disintegrated in Chu Luyue's hands. Countless golden light spots scattered in all directions. In the next moment, as if they were summoned by something, they crazily surged into Chu Luyue's body. A light flashed between Chu Luyue's eyebrows and disappeared in the blink of an eye. However, at this moment, her entire body was surrounded by that dazzling light. Others could barely see her figure, but could not see this subtle movement. For a moment, Chu Luyue felt as if there was a fire burning between her eyebrows. It was scorching hot. However, this feeling had just appeared, but it quickly disappeared. At this moment, she was busy devouring the power of the God Tribulation and converting it into her own strength to prepare for the final breakthrough. Therefore, she did not pay much attention to this matter. The God realm seemed to have sensed the change in the energy in her body and surged along with it. Crack! A crisp sound was heard. It was Mao Yao's icicle. After being trapped by Chu Luyue's God realm, it was completely destroyed by the circulating power. From the beginning to the end, Chu Luyue did not even take the initiative to attack. Mao Yao's expression changed. The aura on his body also weakened. The icicle had condensed its power. Now that it was destroyed, it would naturally backfire. Mao Yao's uneasiness surged wildly. For a moment, he even wanted to retreat. However, he quickly rejected this idea. If he retreated now and showed weakness, would he still have his face? Would he still have the reputation of the great Phoenix Dragon tribe? Mao Yao made up his mind and quickly calmed the restless energy in his body. He stared at Chu Luyue with a heavy gaze. It didn't believe that based on her ability, she would be able to create any waves. Just this incomparably sturdy scale armor alone was something she couldn't break. At this moment, the last golden light spot merged into Chu Luyue's body. Crack! A subtle but clear sound came from her body. The water droplet in her dantian suddenly stopped spinning. The 9 brightly colored lines on it instantly disappeared. Dazzling colors quickly spread on the water droplet. Finally, at the center of the water droplet, a familiar totem condensed. Almost at the same time, Chu Luyue raised her hand. The God realm that filled the sky condensed. The scene paused for a moment. Chu Luyue suddenly curled her lips into a smile. Senior Mao Yao, I'm indebted to you today. I'll give you a display of fireworks. Then, she waved her wrist, and the God realm that filled the sky crazily rushed toward Mao Yao. Bang! 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 In an instant, those light spots exploded and turned into balls of sparks. They burned in an overwhelming manner. Digression, thank you for your votes and tips 6 p.m. mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 15-20. Mao Yao was instantly engulfed by the flames. Sensing the scorching temperature of the burning sparks, Mao Yao knew that something was wrong. He swung his dragon tail and tried to extinguish the flames. However, the flames were formed by the collapse of Chu Luyue's God territory. What burned was not fire, but shocking energy. Moreover, the sparks were scattered all over the place. Mao Yao could not dodge at all. A spark landed on its scales, quickly leaving behind a charred mark. Mao Yao was angry and annoyed. Why is this God territory so strange? Even its scales were burned by the flames. However, Mao Yao did not have time to think about this. Because he realized that his entire body was surrounded by flames. There was no way to retreat. Through the sea of flames, everyone could barely see the scene inside. Mao Yao was struggling frantically as if he wanted to escape. Unfortunately, the surroundings were sealed, and it was too late for him to escape. Moreover, as time passed, the sea of flames was shrinking bit by bit. It wanted to bind Mao Yao directly. He could not break free. Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes and revealed a satisfied smile. She had not used her god territory for a long time and was afraid that she would be rusty. However, it seemed that there was no need to worry now. Moreover, she had just crushed the golden god tribulation and broken through to become a high god. At this moment, her internal and external injuries were recovering at an astonishing speed. Her mood became much more relaxed. She had walked the line between life and death. Fortunately, the bitterness was over and the sweetness was coming. Everything that belonged to her had returned. Everyone looked at this scene in a daze, and some were still unable to react. This. Shangguan Yu turned the tables. Not only did she withstand Mao Yao's third attack, but she also gave him a counterattack. Looking at the huge body struggling in the sea of flames, many people's eyes twitched. Not long ago, this person was very arrogant and domineering, and wanted to take Shangguan Yu's life. However, in the blink of an eye, she had fallen to such a state. Thinking about it, it was really laughable. On the other hand, almost everyone in Shanghai Yu thought that she was doomed today. But now, he was still alive and well. In fact, he had even risen from the middle ninth stage to the high god realm. All in all, the whole thing was very confusing. Even though they had seen it with their own eyes, many people were still in shock and had yet to recover. Even Mu Hongyu, Lin Qifei, and the others were shocked. Obviously, the development of the situation had exceeded their expectations. Amidst the dead silence, someone couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. Why does the divine realm in Shangguan Yu look so familiar? Luo Shishir turned her head in surprise. Fourth brother, what did you say? Luo Yenlin stared at the silver-red sea of fire in the sky with a frown. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. Shishir, she said her name is Shangguan Yu. Luo Shishir nodded. Yes. At that time in Fangzhou City, she had admitted it in front of everyone. I heard that she's Senior Shangguan's favorite descendant. Back in the primeval wilderness, she was, which you? Luo Yenlin asked again. Luo Shishir found it strange, but she shook her head. We don't know. She only said that she was called by this name, but no one knew which character it was. Fourth brother, is this important? Luo Shishir paused and asked hesitantly. Luo Yenlin didn't say anything. He turned around and looked up. The black stone walls of the Donghuang Bell Tower were dark. He stared at a certain spot for a long time before he looked away. Chu Luyue looked down. She sent out a stream of force from her palm. Dumpling and Zi Chen, who had been knocked to the ground and couldn't get up for a long time, were also affected by Chu Luyue's breakthrough. Their injuries were quickly recovering. Then, with Chu Luyue's help, the two flew up and arrived in front of Chu Luyue. Dumpling raised its head and flapped its wings, trying to get closer. However, he only managed to raise his wings halfway before they fell back down. Chu Luyue saw that half of its wings were broken. A long scratch spread across its body. It was a bloody mess. It was a ghastly sight. The crimson gold celestial phoenix was an ancient divine beast. Its physical strength was extremely strong. Apart from a great phoenix dragon of the same level, there was no one else who could injure it to such an extent. A cold light flashed in Chu Luyue's eyes. He raised his hand and gently covered Dumpling's wound. Gentle and vast power flowed into Dumpling's body. It tilted its head and rubbed against the back of Chu Luyue's hand. Its eyes were bright. Although it was seriously injured, it had always been lively. Now that it saw that Chu Luyue had broken through to become a great god, it was overjoyed. It had completely forgotten about the previous troubles. It didn't even care about its own injuries. Chu Luiyue saw that it was still lively despite its mobility problems. He sighed in relief. After carefully treating Dumpling's wounds, Chu Luiyue looked at Zichen on the other side. Its injuries were much more serious than Dumpling's. Although its strength was not much different from Dumpling, it had 2 great phoenix dragon wing bones in its body. Therefore, when Mao Yao attacked Zichen, it was especially ruthless. Moreover, Zichen's bloodline was slightly inferior to that of an ancient divine beast. It was more or less at a disadvantage. Both of its wings were broken and there were many wounds on its body. It was dispirited and on the verge of death. If Chu Luiyue hadn't broken through, it probably wouldn't have been able to hold on for much longer. Fortunately, the 2 great phoenix dragon wing bones in its body were not damaged. Chu Luiyue thought silently. Otherwise, it would be troublesome to find another pair. After using the great phoenix dragon's bones, he was no longer interested in anything else. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Then, she treated Zichen's injuries and summoned it back. With her power nourishing it, the 2 of them would recover much faster than before. After taking care of them, Chu Luiyue turned her gaze and looked in a certain direction. Whoosh! The heavenly square cauldron drew a perfect arc in the air and quickly returned. Chu Luiyue weighed the item in her hand and finally chose to put it away. After doing that, Chu Luiyue looked at the sky again. At this moment, Mao Yao's body was covered in wounds. It was suffering unspeakably. Everyone could hear 1 or 2 painful dragon roars from time to time. Outside the boundary, the few young Great Void Phoenix Dragon Clan juniors saw this scene and came back to their senses after a long time. They were shocked, flustered, and exasperated. Shengguan Yu. Do you really want to go against the Great Phoenix Dragons? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1521. As they spoke, they seemed to want to barge in. However, the wizardry barrier had been reinforced by the elders, and they could not break it. After several failed attempts, those people finally realized that the situation was out of their control. Chu Luiyue looked up lazily and glanced at them. Am I the one who wants to go against you, or are you the one who won't let me off? Mao Yao not only brought people to Lingxiao College, but also used extreme means to force his way in. She had not settled the score with Mao Yao for what he had done to her. The bet is not over yet. If you want me to stop now, you'll have to admit defeat. Chu Luiyue said slowly. There was a hint of a smile on her lips, as if she was telling a funny joke. The people in the sky were speechless. In fact, they were in a dilemma. If things were allowed to develop like this, no one could say for sure what kind of situation it would end up in. Mao Yao sounded like he was being tortured. But if they admitted defeat now? What if Mao Yao blamed them later? And they did not know how to explain it to their clan. Shengguan Yu. Mao Yao also heard Chu Luiyue's voice, and he was even angrier. I'm here. Senior, if you have something to say, just say it. Chu Luiyue smiled and said. Mao Yao was so angry. She thought that Shengguan Jing was already shameless enough. She didn't expect Shengguan Yu to be even better than him. At a time like this, she could still say such words so calmly. He tried to restrain himself, and finally shouted. The bet is over. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows and seemed to be surprised. It's over? Immediately. Immediately. Then, this time, it's my win? Chu Luiyue asked slowly. Mao Yao choked. After a short silence, he finally gave an answer. Fine, you win. Chu Luiyue then revealed a sincere and dazzling smile. She raised her finger slightly, and the silver-red sea of fire in the sky was quickly extinguished. It turned into faint flowing light and flew back to Chu Luiyue. In the end, it silently entered her body. The whole process was smooth and neat. Before the crowd could react, they saw the flames that were originally burning fiercely dissipate in an instant. And Mao Yao, who was trapped in it, finally showed his true body. Ha! On the quiet Qingming Square, a low chuckle suddenly sounded. As soon as the laughter appeared, it was suppressed. However, very soon, all sorts of stifled laughter could be heard from all over the crowd. Everyone tried their best to hold it in, but the pairs of eyes that were looking at the sky as if they were watching a joke revealed their true thoughts at this moment. Mao Yao was originally in an unbearable torment, but suddenly, a stream of light flashed in front of his eyes, and the flames instantly faded away. It was stunned for a moment before it realized that it had already escaped from the sea of fire. Then, he heard laughter coming from below. Almost instinctively, it quickly glanced down. As soon as he looked, he saw countless pairs of eyes staring at him with different expressions. He clearly saw mockery and ridicule in them. When they sensed Mao Yao looking over, many people immediately looked away. But in Mao Yao's eyes, how could he not understand their expressions and reactions? They were obviously mocking him. Mao Yao's eyes were red, and he was furious. He did not need to look to know how pathetic he was at this time. The flames had left countless wounds on his body. The originally magnificent and beautiful scales were now charred black, and some of the more serious ones were even faintly curled up. The great phoenix dragon race valued corpses very much, and they also valued their scales very much. It took a lot of effort to cultivate this dragon armor, but now, it was all destroyed by Sheng Guanyu. Mao Yao suddenly turned his head and stared at Chu Luyue. Sheng Guanyu. You. Very good. Chu Luyue did not seem to understand his threat at all and asked casually. Thank you for your praise, Senior Mao Yao. Since the bet is over, I have won. Then. Can we write off all the things that happened before? It would have been fine if she did not say this, but now that she said this, Mao Yao was so angry that his whole body was trembling. She actually had the cheek to ask this question. She had injured him to such an extent, but she did not feel guilty at all. After today's bet, the grudge between Sheng Guanjing and the great phoenix dragon race will be settled. And you? The matter of using the corpse will be settled from now on. Mao Yao said word by word in a fierce tone. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth, and it was filled with deep hatred and anger. This is over, but today, my dragon armor was burned, and I will not let it go so easily. Sheng Guanyu, you'd better think carefully about how to solve this matter as soon as possible. Otherwise, this shouldn't be considered my fault, right? Chu Luyue interrupted Mao Yao's words with a smile on her face, but her eyes were indifferent and deep, like a glacier that would not melt for 1,000 years. Everything that happened just now should be counted in the bet. When you made the bet, you only said that I would win if I could take 3 of your moves. You didn't say, I can't fight back, did you? Mao Yao choked. It did not say. But that was because it did not expect that she would have the chance to fight back. Mao Yao stared at her and suddenly sneered. You're quite capable. You can even get a divine realm. It suddenly turned its head and looked at Elder Meng. Meng Xian, you guys are really good to her. You're even willing to give her this divine realm. Elder Meng laughed. That's her divine realm. What's there to be reluctant about? Digression. Tomorrow at 12:00 mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1522. Mao Yao's ferocious expression froze. Everyone on Qingming Square widened their eyes when they heard this. Their faces were filled with astonishment. At first, they were shocked by the sudden turn of events and did not have time to think about what was going on. Now that the dust had settled, they finally realized that something was amiss. The god domain suddenly flew over from Mount Pengmin. How did it become Shangguan Yu's? Impossible. Mao Yao retorted instinctively. How could anyone in the world possess a god domain before becoming a high god? There must be something fishy going on. What's so impossible about that? If the god domain doesn't belong to her, why would it listen to her? Elder Meng looked at Mao Yao as if he was looking at an idiot. Mao Yao, even if you're not a human, you should know that, right? Do you want me to explain it to you in detail? Mao Yao's eyes were red. He was so angry that he could not speak for a long time. Then, he suddenly turned his head and looked at Chu Luyue. That sharp, cold, and suspicious gaze harshly slashed across Chu Luyue's body like a sharp knife. Chu Luyue pretended that she did not see it. After all, she had won. Nothing else mattered. She smiled, her eyes curving into crescents. Senior Mao Yao, if you have any objections, then I can show you again whether the god domain is mine or not. Mao Yao shuddered. Show me again? How? The wounds on his body began to hurt again. No need. Mao Yao replied in a fluster. He did not want to repeat what happened just now. In fact, with his strength, he could easily deal with a high god. Even if Shangguan Yu broke through from the middle stage of the 9th level to the high god, he would not be a threat to him. However, the strangest thing was the god domain. For the time being, it was her divine realm. Its power was far beyond the divine realm of an ordinary high god. The fact that the realm of the gods could easily devour the golden divine tribulation and stand up to the power of his bloodline was simply unbelievable. Who knows what methods you used? Of course, Mao Yao was not convinced. He was even resentful. After today's battle, its reputation was completely ruined. Including the entire Great Void Phoenix Dragon race. It still didn't know how to explain it when it returned. This trip was really a double loss. Chu Luyue, on the other hand, was quite open-minded. Naturally, I used my own methods. You also saw the situation just now. No one came forward to help, right? As for this deity domain, if it wasn't for your help today, I'm afraid that it would have taken quite some time before I could summon it back. This time around, I truly have to thank you, Senior Mao Yao. Mao Yao didn't understand what was going on, but he could guess what was going on. When he heard the latter half of the sentence, he was so annoyed that his blood boiled. It came here to teach Shangguan Jing and Shangguan Yu a lesson, not to help her break through. What was going on now? Mao Yao stared at her for a while before he suddenly smiled coldly and looked at Elder Bo Yen. Good. Good. Bo Yen, so this is how Lingxiao College teaches its students. Arrogant and conceited. Impudent and rude. No matter what, it was an important existence in the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race. Today, it was offended and contradicted by Shangguan Yu. Now, she had heard it to this extent, but she didn't regret it at all. This was too much. At this moment, Elder Bo Yen was looking at Chu Luyue with great joy. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that these few years of waiting were not in vain. He was also stunned when he was suddenly called out. Senior Mao Yao, why do you say that? You were the one who suggested today's bet, right? You only agreed to your request. What's wrong with that? If she didn't agree, you wouldn't have let it go, right? Besides, you barged into Lingxiao College today. This debt, we haven't settled with you yet. Lingxiao College didn't like to cause trouble, but it didn't mean that they were afraid of it. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon race was an ancient divine beast and was indeed powerful. However, Lingxiao College had been in the Divine Ruins world for tens of thousands of years and was not to be trifled with. If they really wanted to talk about it carefully, Mao Yao was in the wrong first. Was just forced to retaliate. One was an ancient divine beast with a noble status, while the other was a young junior of the college. wasn't it very clear who was the one bullying the weak? Even if this matter was spread out, everyone would be able to see who was right and who was wrong at a glance. Mao Yao was originally in the wrong. Now that he had lost this bet, he had lost his imposing manner. For a moment, he only felt extremely vexed. You guys are so biased towards her and taught her to be so arrogant and domineering. One day, it will cause big trouble. Senior Mao Yao, you don't have to worry about this. A clear and low voice suddenly sounded. It was as cold as ice and snow, but it also carried an unattainable nobility and disdain. Mao Yao turned around and saw Rong Xiu, who had been silent for a long time, finally open his mouth. He was suspended in midair with one hand behind his back. There was a cluster of golden flames burning quietly on the fingertips of his other hand. He moved his fingers slightly and the flame was instantly extinguished. Then, he raised his chin slightly and looked into Mao Yao's eyes. There seemed to be waves surging in his deep phoenix eyes. The next moment, Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. If I's princess consort causes any trouble, I will naturally take responsibility. This sentence was clear and indifferent, but it was so domineering that it couldn't be disobeyed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1523. Such open and above-board favoritism, such clear and obvious doting. Rong Xiu's words seemed to be polite, but the translation was, she is mine. If she gets into trouble, I will bear the consequences. How can other people speak? Chu Luyue had a thought. She tilted her head and glanced at Rong Xiu. She seemed to have thought of something. She raised her eyebrows slightly and her lips curled up. As if sensing her gaze, Rong Xiu suddenly looked over. Their eyes met, but it felt like 10,000 years. Chu Luyue's heart felt like it had been smashed by something. Something gushed out from the bottom of her heart. It was sour, sweet, and soft, and it easily swallowed her. She even slowed down her breathing. It was as if everything in front of her was a dream. The slightest movement would shatter it. They had clearly been together all this time. Although they were so close, she felt as if they had not seen each other for a very, very long time. Only this feeling of being protected and favored had always existed. From a very, very long time ago until now, it had always been the same. Rong Xiu suddenly waved at her. You, come here. His voice was low and pleasant. It was a gentleness and affection that outsiders had never seen before. Chu Luyue moved and headed in Rong Xiu's direction. However, just as she moved, a subtle and clear sound suddenly came from below. Chu Luyue instinctively looked down, but her pupils instantly shrank. The spring at the top of Thousand Wine Mountain had completely frozen. White and clear frost covered the spring completely, piling up in a thick layer. At a glance, it reflected a clear glow and was bone-chilling. As if sensing her abnormal expression, Rong Xiu's heart skipped a beat and he also looked down. A biting cold aura suddenly flashed across his eyes. Crack! An inch-long crack suddenly appeared on the frozen surface of the spring eye. Hearing the commotion, Elder Bo Yen and the others immediately turned to look. When they saw that the mouth of the spring had been completely frozen, their faces changed. Quick! Triggering heavenly thunder. Elder Bo Yen shouted anxiously. Just now, all of their attention was placed on you, and for a moment, they had actually overlooked this matter. It's too late. Elder Ouyang stared blankly at the mouth of the spring. His face was a little pale. Tianlei, which is triggered by ordinary refining, is useless against this. Besides, who would have the patience to lure Tianlei to land at a time like this? As a matter of fact, this spring should have frozen long ago. However, you had broken through in the middle and attracted the divine tribulation. Thus, it was delayed with great difficulty. But now, the divine tribulation had passed. No one could stop him anymore. Crack. Next to the first crack, a second one appeared. The crack did not appear on the surface of the ice. Instead, it appeared on the bottom of the ice. Under normal circumstances, the cracks in the ice layer were irregular. However, the two lines that appeared now were of the same length, and the lines were perfectly straight. Although it was called a crack, it was more like an invisible knife had carved it out bit by bit. Soon, a third one appeared. This one was slightly curved and presented a perfect arc. Obviously, this was not an accident. It was controlled by an external force. Wuxia frowned slightly and immediately attacked. A golden flame flew out rapidly. At this moment, Tianlei was no longer descending continuously. The invisible barrier around the mouth of the spring that blocked Tianlei no longer seemed to be there. That cluster of golden flames directly landed on the layer of ice. However, no matter how the flame burned, the ice layer did not seem to be affected at all. More and more marks appeared on the ice layer, as if they were gradually forming some kind of pattern. The burning golden flame was quickly extinguished and dissipated silently. Wuxia's heart sank. He looked at Chu Luyue. At this moment, she was staring at the mouth of the spring. Her gaze was heavy, as if she had sunk into some kind of deep thought. Wuxia knew that something was wrong. He moved his body and immediately flew toward Chu Luyue. He was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Chu Luyue. He grabbed Chu Luyue's hand. Chu Luyue suddenly came back to her senses and looked up at him. Wuxia. Her voice was very soft, but it was very firm. I have to go down. Wuxia's hands suddenly tightened. It was not that she did not know how dangerous it was down there. Although she had been summoned back to the deity realm and returned to being a high deity, going down rashly was still a matter of life and death. I'll go for you. Wuxia said in a low voice. Chu Luyue suddenly smiled and intertwined her fingers with his. Since this matter started because of me, I should be responsible for it. If Dumpling had not swallowed the power of Tianlei, things would not have developed to this point. I'll be back soon. She fixed her gaze on Wuxia and said. Wuxia held her hand tightly, his phoenix eyes deep. You said the same thing last time. But after that, it was the difference between life and death. He went to heaven and hell to find her with great difficulty. Now, before he even had the time to hug her, she wanted to go again. He would never agree to it. Even without you, the spring would erupt sooner or later. Wuxia's expression was unusually cold. In the past few years, he had racked his brains and even forcefully sealed a part of her soul and memory, just so that the same thing would not happen again. But, the speed of her recovery was far beyond his expectations. So much so that before he could completely solve the problem of the spring, she had already awakened again. But in the end, it was because of me that everyone was in trouble. Chu Luyue shook her head and smiled. Wuxia's heart sank little by little. Crack. More and more cracks appeared on the frozen ice surface. Elder Bo Yen stared at the gradually forming pattern. He felt that it was somewhat familiar, but he could not remember where he had seen it before. His mind spun wildly, desperately trying to remember what it was, but it was still a blank. A chilling aura gradually spread out from the mouth of the spring. On the top of the mountain, the surroundings of the spring were quietly covered with a thin layer of ice. It was like the white frost that fell in the early morning of winter. Soon, the mountain rocks froze and the trees withered. The vitality of the Thousand Wine Mountain seemed to be easily taken away by the white frost. Everything started to turn gray and lifeless at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, the white frost had spread from the top of the mountain to the middle of the mountain, and then to the foot of the mountain. It was silent, but extremely terrifying and strange. Elder Bo Yen and the others saw this scene and their faces turned pale. Chu Lue suddenly took a step forward. She was already standing very close to Rongxiu, and now they were almost pressed against each other. Then, she grabbed the front of Rongxiu's shirt and pulled it down. She tiptoed, raised her face slightly, and kissed him on the lips. Soft and cold. Rongxiu. Her lips moved slightly, and the words were blurred between her lips and teeth. Release the seal on the green cloud leaderboard. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1524. Rongxiu's hands held her slender waist tightly, as if he wanted to crush her into his arms and embed her into his flesh and blood. He kissed her back as if he was desperately suppressing something. Only when he smelled the sweet scent of rust did he finally let go of her. His gaze was deep and dark like the sea. There seemed to be a layer of invisible energy that wrapped around her. After a long while, he closed his eyes and hid all the emotions in his eyes. Okay. As his voice fell, a thick cold aura spread out from his body, and a biting cold and powerful force suddenly rushed out from his body. Buzz. A buzzing sound was heard. Everyone heard the sound and turned to look. This sound was actually coming from the Donghuang Bell Tower. On the dark stone wall, several streams of light appeared quietly. This is, Elder Bo Yen looked at this scene in shock. Why did Rongxiu suddenly summon the Azure Cloud leaderboard? In the entire Lingxiao College, other than the deans and a few elders who could do this, the first place on the Azure Cloud leaderboard could also do this. Rongxiu had dominated the leaderboard for a few years, so this was naturally not a big deal to him. But, why did he have to now? Several streams of light danced and overlapped with each other. Under the sparkling light, names gradually appeared one by one. This sudden turn of events caused many of the students on Qingming Square to fall into a state of confusion. Why did Senior Rongxiu summon the Azure Cloud leaderboard? Wait. Other than the Warrior leaderboard and the Weapon Craftsman leaderboard, why did the other two leaderboards appear too? Among the 4 leaderboards, he has 2 first places, so logically speaking, he should only be able to summon those 2. Why did the other 2 leaderboards appear together? What is he trying to do? Everyone was dumbfounded. Bo Yen, what is going on? Elder Huafeng frowned. He felt that something was wrong. With Rongxiu's current strength, summoning the 4 leaderboards was within reason. But the key was, why did it have to be now? Elder Bo Yen was silent for a long time. In fact, he had a guess in his heart. However, that idea was so absurd that he subconsciously rejected it. If that's true. On the 4 black stone walls of the Donghuang Bell Tower, the 4 lists suddenly appeared. Among the neatly arranged rows of names, the dark spots at the top were particularly conspicuous. 2 first places and 2 second places. They all had the same name. The name that had been deliberately erased. Actually, everyone was already accustomed to it. After all, the Ascension rankings had always been like this for the past few years. Normally, no one would even take a second look at it. Just as they raised their heads to look at the Ascension rankings with puzzled expressions, a golden glow suddenly appeared. Like a ray of light cutting through the darkness, it instantly shone brilliantly. Look! It seems like the number 1 celestial physician is about to appear. Suddenly, someone exclaimed. In fact, it wasn't just the celestial physician ranking. The black seals on the other 3 rankings were gradually being lifted as well. It was as if the thick black fog was gradually dispersing, gradually revealing the true scenery hidden behind it. It was also as if something was slowly rising from the bottom of the dark sea, gradually becoming clearer. Everyone subconsciously held their breaths as they watched this scene without blinking. That name had been sealed for a few years, and there weren't many people in Lingxiao College who had seen it back then. To most of the students, it was just a rumor. They had been curious and investigated it, but they had all quietly given up in the end. It was just a name, and it wasn't that important whether they knew it or not. However, at this moment, when they had the opportunity to see that name, they all coincidentally converged their gazes and attention onto the ascension rankings. What kind of person is she to be able to stand side by side with Wuxia and be on par with him? Between heaven and earth, there was complete silence. As the golden glow streaked across it, a name gradually appeared. It was dazzling. You. No surname, only a single U. On the 4 lists, the name that had been deliberately erased appeared together. Seeing this scene, many people were stunned. You? No surname? This name. How can someone use only a single word as their name? It was no wonder that everyone was so surprised. In Lingxiao College, the students had different identities. Some inconvenient ones would often choose to use an alias. For example, when Chu Luyue came, he used the name Chu Yu. The name that was written during the admission test would still be the same name when it appeared on the ascension rankings. Regardless of whether it was a real name or a fake one, everyone had a name and a surname. There had never been a case where there was only a single word. In the crowd, Luo Shishir stared at the word "you" as her emotions churned. She turned to look at Luo Yenlin and asked softly, "Fourth brother, is the name of Shengguan Yu also you?" Luo Yenlin glanced at her with a solemn expression. Then, he nodded. Yes. At first, he was still a little uncertain. But now, everything was laid out before his eyes. She. It was her. Luo Shishir was stunned. In fact, she had already vaguely guessed it in her heart. Now that she received a definite answer, she was not surprised. However, is this really her name? No surname? Luo Yenlin shook his head. She has always used this name in the college. As for her surname, no one knew. In the sky, Chu Luyue slowly let go of Wuxia's hand. The boiling feeling between her eyebrows surged again. She took a deep breath. A rainbow light streaked across the sky. Scarlet Cloud sword was already in her hands. The next moment, she gripped the hilt tightly with both hands and raised the sword high. The sword fell. Heaven and earth shook. Digression, Kavinka's bald February quietly floated by. However, there was one thing to clarify, Wuxia was not the dean. Cough. At 6:00 p.m., please continue reading. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1525. More than 100 silver sword chi suddenly flew out. Instantly, they covered the entire 1,000 wine mountain. Thud thud. The sword chi flew down and stabbed into the ground fiercely. The rapidly spreading white frost suddenly stopped moving forward. Countless sword chi surrounded the 1,000 wine mountain and formed a gigantic cage, completely sealing the strange cold air. Apart from the sword chi, everything was normal. Within the sword chi, life was extinguished. In the blink of an eye, the trees and grass on the 1,000 wine mountain had already turned yellow. Some were even charred and curled up. At a glance, it was as if something had sucked away the last bit of life. Chu Liyue's figure moved, and she went straight for the spring. Shengguan Jing suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness. His intuition from his bloodline made him exclaim subconsciously. However, he was very far away from Chu Liyue at this moment and could not stop her in time. Chu Liyue's figure was already like a scarlet sword that pierced straight for the spring. The moment her feet touched the ground and stepped on the white frost that covered the entire mountain, Chu Liyue immediately felt a bone-chilling coldness surging up from her feet. In an instant, it enveloped her entire body. Chu Liyue exhaled gently and instantly condensed into a ball of white mist in the cold wind. Thousand Wine Mountain was as warm as spring all year round because of a special barrier. In her impression, this place had never been so cold. Chu Luiyue looked around and finally looked at the spring in the center. At this moment, the strange pattern above the spring was basically 3/4 complete. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Then, she gripped the Scarlet Heaven sword in her hand tightly. On the sword, a ball of flames spread rapidly. Half of it was pure gold and the other half was transparent. Heat and cold intertwined. It reflected a ghastly sword light. Now that she had broken through to become a high god and held a venerable divine weapon, she could naturally unleash stronger strength. The sword chi that she released just now could only be maintained for a short period of time. If she really wanted to solve this problem, she had to attack the source. Naturally, it was this spring. Clang! Chu Luiyue ruthlessly stabbed his sword into the center of the spring. Crack! A crack finally appeared on the thick layer of ice. 2 clusters of flames intertwined and crazily rushed down from the opening. Then, Chu Luiyue gripped the hilt of the sword with both hands and spun it with all his might. Crack! Several fine cracks instantly appeared at the edge of the opening. Under the ice, the pattern that was about to be completed seemed to have been slashed in the middle and became mottled and fragmented. A terrifying chill crept up Scarlet Heaven Sword's body. The burning flames on the sword began to extinguish gradually. Even the tip of the sword was quickly covered in white frost. One of the flames was the bloodline fire of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and the other was the karmic fire of the heavenly square cauldron. No matter which one it was, they could definitely be considered the top powers in the world. But at this moment, as soon as it came into contact with the cold air in the spring, it quickly fell into a disadvantage. This was enough to show how powerful it was. Chu Luiyue circulated the force in his body as he gripped Scarlet Heaven sword tightly and continued to stab deeper into the cave. Finally, a gap appeared in the layer of ice. Chu Luiyue leaped. His figure immediately disappeared into the layer of ice. Everything happened too quickly. When Chu Luiyue's figure entered the spring again, everyone came back to their senses. What is Shengguanyu doing? She actually went in just like that. That spring is very strange right now. I'm afraid it's dangerous for her to go in. I only have one thought now. So she's the person whose name was erased from the green cloud roll. No wonder. No wonder. But that's not right. Didn't they say that Shengguanyu is only 17 years old this year? A few years ago, she should still be a little girl. How can she be the one in the rumors? But the name on the green cloud roll has already appeared. Even the god realm has been summoned by her. If it's not her, who else could it be? Everyone was confused and full of doubts. Too many things had happened in a single day today. Each and every one of them was filled with a huge impact, making it difficult for people to cope with. Now, they were even starting to feel numb. Mao Yao looked down at the spring in shock. Chu Luiyue's figure had already been swallowed by the ice water and had completely disappeared. At the edge of the broken crack, crimson gold and transparent flames were burning quietly. From the outside, only a small piece of water could be seen under the gap. Perhaps it was because the sky was too dark or for some other reason, but the water was dark, making it difficult to see clearly. Shengguanyu went down just like that. He had also come into contact with the cold air just now and could clearly feel that it contained a shocking amount of power. Although Shengguanyu was a high god, going down like that was no different from courting death. Even if she had that strange god realm, she would not be able to save herself. With that thought, the accumulated resentment in Mao Yao's heart finally eased. Since this matter is over, we'll take our leave. Mao Yao said. Actually, he wanted to stay here and continue watching the show. After all, he had suffered so much in Shengguanyu. Only by watching her suffer enough torture could he vent the hatred in his heart. Unfortunately, he was in too much of a sorry state right now. He did not want to stay here for even a second longer. Elder Bo Yen and the others were all thinking about Chu Luyue. How could they care about him? Senior Mao Yao, take care. You've already walked the path, so we won't send you off. Elder Bo Yan's tone was not polite. Mao Yao's expression changed slightly, but he still endured it. Light flashed on its body, and in the next moment, it changed into a piece of purplish gold scale armor. The academy elders opened the barrier and could not wait to send this god of plague away. The moment the scale armor left, the academy's barrier closed again. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1526. The scale flew back, and Mao Yao, who was standing outside the barrier, suddenly came back to his senses. He moved his body and coughed twice. The few juniors beside him hurriedly came over nervously and asked worriedly. It was a pity that these words only made Mao Yao recall his previous miserable appearance. They saw everything. Mao Yao was very frustrated, and his expression was naturally not any better. Soon, those people sensed that he was in a bad mood and quieted down timidly, not daring to say anything else. The atmosphere was cold and silent, as if it had frozen. The few of them secretly looked at each other and saw regret in each other's eyes. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have come this time. I thought that I would be able to show my face in front of Mao Yao, but who knew that it would end up like this? Mao Yao had always cared about his face the most. Now that they had seen what had happened today, they were afraid that he would bear a grudge against them as well. In the future, who knew how he would be taken care of? How could Mao Yao not be vexed in his heart? After knowing that Shengguan Jing was still alive, he was filled with anger and only wanted to take revenge on Shengguan Jing. Bringing these people along was purely for the sake of setting up a battle formation. In terms of strength, these people combined were not as strong as him. But now, he had lost all his face. Not only did they not help him, but his ridiculous and sorry state was also seen by them. If he had known earlier, he would not have done anything unnecessary. Mao Yao took a deep breath. Because his real body was injured, his aura was much weaker than when he first came. Let's go. Mao Yao ordered and turned to leave. The few people behind him did not dare to object and immediately lowered their heads and followed carefully. The group of figures quickly disappeared outside the barrier. However, at this moment, no one cared about them. Everyone's attention was on the Thousand Wine Mountain. No matter how slow they would realize that something was wrong with the Thousand Wine Mountain. Other than those who are responsible for guarding the Academy's barrier, summon all the remaining elders. Elder Bo Yen instructed Elder Huafeng. Elder Huafeng nodded with a solemn expression, and his figure quickly disappeared on the spot. Elder Bo Yen pondered for a moment and said, "By the way, Ouyang, go and invite those people over." Elder Ouyang was shocked and hesitated. Really? Those few people would not easily come out of seclusion. If they were invited to come out, then, it meant that the situation must have become so serious that it was difficult to deal with. The elders were fine, but if the students saw it, they would feel uneasy and worried. At that time, if the people's hearts became unstable, Elder Bo Yen nodded his head. I have to hurry. He knew what Elder Ouyang was worried about. If it wasn't for the fact that he had no other choice, he wouldn't have wanted to do this. Now it's really, is down there. No matter what, we have to bring her back safely. Elder Bo Yen sighed softly, but he was very determined. Hearing this, Elder Ouyang seemed to be touched by something and immediately agreed. Good. I'll go right now. The elders quickly got to work. Elder Wanzheng looked at the rapidly gathering figures, but the uneasiness in his heart could not be dispelled. He clenched his fists and frowned. If only the dean was still here, if he was here, they would definitely be more confident. After all, he had always been the one looking after the spring. Now that something had happened, there was no one more suitable than him to take action. Elder Bo Yen closed his eyes and sighed softly. How could he not want this to happen? But after the dean left back then, there was no news for a few years. Even now, Yu had returned, but there was still no news from him. If he did not have a way to confirm that the dean was still alive, but waiting like this was not a solution. If the spring completely exploded. Chaotic thoughts kept flashing through his mind, causing Elder Bo Yen to feel a little vexed. Suddenly, a figure flew past his eyes. His heart leaped to his throat. Rong Xiao. What are you doing? Rong Xiao did not answer. He stood right above Thousand Wine Mountain. The wind blew the corner of his clothes, outlining the man's tall figure. His clothes fluttered, and the surroundings were silent. He lowered his eyes slightly and looked down. The sharp sword chi had already enveloped the surroundings of Thousand Wine Mountain. But the cold air was pressing, and some places on the mountain peak were already covered with thick white frost. And it was slowly but steadily spreading to the surroundings. Those sword chi would not be able to last for long. Rong Xiao's expression was cold, and his noble and devilish face was cold and disdainful. In the depths of his deep phoenix eyes, one side burned with golden flames, while the other side surged with endless black light. In just an instant, he closed his eyes. Everything in front of him was completely covered up. The next moment, a vast and majestic aura suddenly erupted from his body. In an instant, countless golden sparks fell from the sky. In just a short while, it had completely covered Thousand Wine Mountain. The scene inside was now completely blocked off, and outsiders could no longer peek in the slightest. Rong Xiao's body was also surrounded by a layer of golden barrier. His figure was covered. The golden light flickered, and even the outline of his figure could no longer be seen clearly. Rong Xiao opened his eyes and raised his hand. The void in front of him suddenly split open silently. An item flew out quickly. Bang! Rong Xiao grabbed the item in his hand. It was a scroll. His wrist shook lightly, and the scroll opened. At the top, there were 3 big golden words, clear and bright. Pantheon Record. And at this moment, somewhere on the scroll, a name was faintly discernible. Digression. Kawan is so uncomfortable. Woo 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 woo. Tomorrow at 12:00, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.